live as the Yountville Town Council. Welcome and thanks everyone that is watching for your patience. We just were meeting as the Yountville Finance Authority, and we may or may not have been live streaming as we believed we were. So hopefully those of you that were interested to watch were able to do so. With that, we're going to go ahead and transition and begin our Yountville Town Council special meeting for Tuesday, May 5th, 2020. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. And before I ask for roll call, I will read a little bit of protocol information. This is, as I stated, a special meeting for the Yountville Town Council on Tuesday, May 5th, 2020. This special meeting is being held pursuant to Government Code Section 54953B related to teleconferencing of meetings. In addition, and pursuant to the Governor's proclamation of a state emergency and executive orders where certain sections of the Brown Act relating to teleconference meetings have been waived. The town manager is present in his office. I, as the mayor, present here in the council chambers. Vice Mayor Dorman, council members Moeller, Dornbecker, and Durham, along with staff, are participating remotely by video and audio in conformance with the governor's executive order. We also have guests that will be brought into the meeting as their agenda items are called. Prior to roll call, I'd like to confirm that all members of the town council are present in the video gallery. And I do see 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. I'd like to ask each member as we go to unmute and respond in the order called by the town clerk to answer both of the following questions. 1, to confirm you are able to hear the proceedings, and 2, that you have a copy of the town council special meeting agenda. Clerk, if you could please poll the council.
Thank you. Councilmember Dornbecker.
Yes to both.
Thank you. Councilmember Durham.
Yes to both.
Thank you. Councilmember Moeller.
Yes to both.
Vice Mayor Dorman.
Yes to both.
Mayor Dunbar.
Yes to both.
Thank you so much.
Let the record reflect that all council members have indicated they're able to hear each other. I will also note that public comment was available prior to this meeting on the email account publiccomment@yville.com, and we will be asking as we get to each agenda item if there have been any public comments submitted. I know that there have been for some of the items, so we will address those as we go along. Before we proceed, I'd like our viewers to know any vote taken during this teleconference meeting will be taken by a roll call vote led by the town clerk. And as I stated, we have staff members and individual guests that will be included in this meeting that are related to the specific items on the agenda. So with that, let's formally go ahead and call the roll, please, clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Dornbecker.
Here.
Councilmember Durham.
Here.
Councilmember Moeller.
Here.
Vice Mayor Dorman.
Here.
Mayor Dunbar.
Here.
Thank you.
If you'd please join in the Pledge of Allegiance, if you could face the closest flag to your location. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next up is the adoption of our council agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Councilmember
Second.
Durham. Motion by Councilmember Durham, second. Councilmember Moeller. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Durham.
Yes.
Councilmember Moeller.
Yes.
Councilmember Dornbecker.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Dorman.
Yes.
Mayor Dunbar.
Yes.
Thank
Here.
you.
Or yes to the agenda. And yes here. Next up, we do have a proclamation, and I will read this. Normally, I would be very happy on behalf of the council to welcome all of our Public Works team here in the room. I will remotely present this to our Public Works Director, who is sitting on the other side of the building here at Town Hall. But on behalf of Director Tagliabashi and our entire Public Works crew, I will read this proclamation from the council recognizing National Public Works Month for May 2020. Whereas public works services provided in the town of Yamhill are integral to maintaining buildings and infrastructure, as well as providing a healthy, comfortable, and safe environment for residents, visitors, and businesses. Whereas the skills and experience of our town of Yamhill public works staff are integral to the quality and longevity of town facilities and systems, the natural beauty of parks and open space, as well as the planning, design, and construction of a significant number of capital projects. Whereas support of municipal services, including water, sewer, streets, public buildings, and solid waste collection, is critical to the operations of Yamhill's Public Works Department. Whereas the efficiency of the Yamhill Public Works personnel is influenced by the people's positive attitude and understanding of the importance of the work they perform. Whereas our Public Works staff prioritize service to Yamhill residents, visitors, and businesses, regardless of the timing or natural conditions in which they work, including during wildfires, floods, power outages, severe weather, and other challenging circumstances. Whereas the dedication and professionalism of the Public Works staff has been highlighted these past few months during the COVID-19 pandemic response, as they set aside personal obligations at home to maintain uninterrupted service for our residents. Now therefore be it resolved, I, John F. Dunbar, Mayor of the Town of Yamhill, on behalf of the entire Yamhill Town Council, hereby proclaim May 2020 as National Public Works Month. I ask all of our citizens and civic organizations in the Town of Yamhill to recognize the contributions our Public Works staff make every day to our health, safety, and high quality of life. On behalf of the entire council and our community, thank you very much, Joe, and your entire team.
Thank you, Mayor Dunbar. Thanks, member of the council.
Thanks, Joe.
That was quite a virtual applause we had going there. And we will be getting you the written proclamation to share with our entire team. So thank you very much. I'm going to move on to the next item, which is public comment on items not listed on our agenda. Have we received any, Michelle?
No, we have not, Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on to item 7, which is our consent calendar. We have 2 items. One is to adopt resolution number 20-3981, awarding the bid for the 2020 sewer main and lateral repairs project, WW-2020 and WW-3020, approving a construction contract with Robotic Sewer Solutions, Inc. for an amount not to exceed $84,000, and authorizing the town manager to execute the construction contract. That's item 7A. Item 7B, which is item 20-2541, approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held on April 21st, 2020. Is there, first of all, did we receive any public comment on the consent calendar?
No, we did not, Mayor.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the consent calendar as presented?
So moved.
Thank you,
Gonna
Councilmember Moeller.
second.
Made the motion. Councilmember Durham seconded. Roll call vote, please, Michelle.
Thank you. Councilmember Moeller,
Yes.
Councilmember Durham,
Yes.
Councilmember Dornbecker,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Dorman,
Yes.
Mayor Dunbar.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on now. We have no presentations today. We do have a public hearing item. Item, let's see, 20-2482, a use permit request, Napa Valley Balloons. Consider adoption of resolution 20-3982, approving a use permit for Napa Valley Balloons to conduct hot air balloon launches from an open field within the existing vineyard at 6406 Washington Street. And I believe, are we starting with Steve, Sandra? Who's starting this one? Don't all unmute at once. Sandra.
I will jump in. We have received some letters of opposition raising FAA issues, and our town attorney has not had a chance to review those issues yet and respond. So there's an opportunity to continue tonight's meeting to the first meeting in June, if that is the council's desire.
Okay, Gary, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I would just add that there was an 18-page letter and lots of documents that we received just after noon today. And I think it is wise to review those thoroughly and in light of the resolution and to make any recommendations you might have. That wasn't really possible before the meeting this afternoon. And so staff is requesting some additional time to review those if the council is willing to continue it.
Thank you. So should I open the public hearing and we can make that determination after opening the hearing since it was listed for today?
Yeah, I think it's fine to do that. And then you'll be continuing the public hearing to a date certain at the next meeting.
Thank you. And Sandra, your request was to continue to June 2, I believe.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions of this before I open the public hearing? Councilmember Durham.
For the town lawyer, we have a second balloon company deploying balloons in Yountville. Is that not correct?
I believe that is correct, yes.
So if this is an issue with this one, is this an issue with this one that's currently operating?
Not necessarily. So a lot of the issues that were raised in the letter on the brief skimming had to do with its proximity to the current residential uses relevant to the property specifically where this one will be approved. And I believe the other one is approved on the Vintner Estate on the other side, so it's not near residential uses. So, and
Yeah.
Steve might have additional information.
I will, first of all, we've had 3 balloon companies that have had approved launch sites. Gabe's company, actually, for some of you that may recall, Napa Valley Balloons initially launched from the parking lot of Washington Square up, which is now the R&D Hillstone facility. And then Napa Valley Balloons Aloft launched from the V Marketplace parking lot right behind the Railway Inn. And the third balloon company launches out of the Napa Valley Wine Train parking lot. And then there's also Gabe's company had also, you may recall, had been launching from the driving range of the golf course before the issue became a concern with the veterans home. And he has sought to find a location in Yountville to be able to continue operating out of the Yountville area. So, I mean, just to be really clear, we've had 3 balloon companies and actually 4 over time that have operated out of Yountville.
Are there any specific questions from council about this? I see that we do have the applicant on the meeting. I don't know if we should take any comments, Gary, if we go ahead. I do want, since there are no more questions from council, I do want to formally open the public hearing. Should we take no testimony on this, Gary, and continue this if that's the desire of the council? Is that the best way to move forward?
So since the applicant's here, I think it's okay to allow some testimony or a comment on the possibility of a continuance. It's still all right to continue it after that occurs. It's up to the council. Either one's allowed. Okay.
Gabe, since I see that you're here and you're sitting apparently in front of the exact same wall that Planning Director Liston is at, if you did, and our town attorney, yes. Gabe, if you just wanted to share your thoughts on the potential continuance based on the new circumstances.
Sure. and whatever works for the town of Yountville. I'm not here to rock any boats or create any issues. If that's what you guys feel the most confident and most comfortable doing, then I'm absolutely fine with that.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that consideration. Any further consideration before I close the public hearing? Actually, I'm not closing the public hearing. Sandra?
Yes?
I just saw that you unmuted. I didn't know if you had any additional comments.
Oh, no, I didn't
Okay.
mean to. Sorry, no.
So I would entertain a motion by council to continue this item, continue the public hearing to our June 2nd council meeting. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Wait, Michelle has a hand raised. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just for clarification, the continuation to June 2nd would be at 3 p.m. like today's meeting. And then also we did receive quite a few public comments on this item today. We won't read them now, but I want to assure the public who's watching that they will be copied and attached to the staff report for the June 1st meeting for reference for council. But they all have been provided to council in advance of this meeting.
Thank you for reminding me and clarifying of that. And also, I think the members of the public interested in this are probably going to be interested in some of that data dump that was made at the very last minute that the abundance of caution, our attorney and our staff want to review. So with that, did I entertain a motion yet? I can't even.
Councilmember Dornbecker motioned.
I'll second.
Thank you. Councilmember Moeller seconded that. Roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Councilmember Dornbecker.
Aye.
Councilmember Moeller.
Yes.
Councilmember Durham. Councilmember Durham.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Dorman.
Yes.
Mayor Dunbar.
Yes. Thank you. So we do continue that public hearing to our meeting on June 2nd. We will, as the clerk clearly stated, we will carry over all of the public comments to that part of the public hearing. So Gabe, thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you in a few weeks.
Okay. And just a reminder, it's at 3 p.m. again.
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We are going to move on now to our next item. Our first administrative regular item, item 10A. And for the record, this is item 20-2535, Home Investment Partnership Program Grant Application Amendment. Consider adoption of resolution number 20-3983, approving amendment to the 2018 application to the California State Department of Housing and Community Development for a grant of up to $500,000 under the Home Investment Partnership Program in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I will just say before we do invite our guests from Napa Valley Community Housing to join us, there will be a presentation as part of this item. And so please bear with us as we do some screen sharing and including our guest in this. So I believe we're, Sandra, are you starting this item?
I think I'm going to jump in on this one,
okay.
Mayor.
Go ahead, Daniel.
So thank you. Good evening, Council. This item asks you to consider an amendment to our 2018 home grant application. I'm going to let my colleague, Jonathan Sakamoto from the City of Napa, who administers our home program here in Yountville, I'm going to hand it over to him as I derive the presentation for him. So I'm going to mute myself, but Jonathan, just let me know when you want me to advance the screens. I'm going to pull it up. One second, please.
Welcome, Mr. Sakamoto. Glad you could join us today.
Thank you so much for having us.
All right.
Okay.
Daniel, are you ready?
We're
ready to go.
Okay.
All right. So, home tenant-based rental assistance. If you could advance the slide, we'll get started. Let's sure I can match it up as well on my side. So for the home program, there are a variety of affordable housing activities that you can use this for. Be it as federal funds passed through the state. The state home program is a competitive awarding program. And currently, what we're using this most in Yountville is for the homeowner repair program or owner occupied rehabilitation. The TBRA, TBRA, the Tenant Based Rental Assistance Program, is one of the tools you can use in home in order to help service your community. So with the pandemic, we reached out to the state to inquire about using TBRA and amending this application so that we can help address the needs of the community. And as it turns out, they were already prepared to reach out to the community to see if any of the program recipients were in process of making these changes. So they're open and ready to these changes that we're proposing. We can advance the next slide, please. So initially, we're looking at allocating the $250,000 from the 2018 grant to launch this program. It would assist 15 to 20. There's obviously going to be some flexibility depending on the need of the community, how much the tenants actually need, because it is income based, and so it's going to be flexible based on that. One thing we want to consider is, there are some people who are still on a wait list for the homeowner repair program as well. We're just keeping that in mind. So the waiting list for the TBRA program would be established through a lottery. People would be able to apply online via the computer or their smartphone. This will actually all be done online. So we at the Housing Authority here in Napa will help people if they don't have a computer, don't have a smartphone. So we can help them through that process to get them onto the lottery. Next slide, please. So this program targets low income. So low income meaning 60% of the area median income, which for the area is about $60,000 for a household of 4. There will be preferences to those who apply to the lottery, and it would be, the preferences are those who have been economically impacted by the pandemic and are able to lease in their current unit. Other people are eligible to apply, obviously, but the preference will be for those who are being affected by the pandemic and are able to use the assistance where they're at, so we can help them remain housed. Next slide, please. The units themselves must be located in the town of Yountville. Mobile homes are eligible. Landlords must agree to participate. There are rules to the program, housing quality rules, safety rules that they must adhere to in order to participate. And the housing costs themselves must be within the guidelines set by the program, which are based on HUD's fair market rents. Next slide, please. So the maximum term of the assistance would be a year, 12 months. That can change if the tenants decide they no longer need the help, or if the tenants' income goes up so much that they no longer need the assistance. It could be set short of that, but it's up to 12 months. The rental assistance is based on the tenant paying about 30% of their income towards their housing, which would be rent and utilities combined. And the subsidy itself is capped at 110% of fair market rents, which is set by tenants do have the ability to pay the difference and pay higher rents up to 50% of their income toward their housing. So if we switch to the next slide, there's an example that kind of helps illustrate that. So being that you have a tenant with $60,000 of income in a 3-bedroom unit, the payment standard ends in the middle is $2,983. So 30% would be about $1,500, which the tenant would pay toward their rent and utilities, and the program would make up that difference, the $1,483. So to the left, you would see below the payment standard a unit that is cheaper, which might happen. The tenant would still pay their 30%, and the program would then pay $500 to cover that gap. And on the right side, when you go beyond the payment standard, the tenant is, in this scenario, paying $2,417 toward their housing, which is just below the 50% cap. So they would be eligible. And the programs, if you look at the assistance, the program pays, it is capped. It's still at $1,483 because they've gone above the payment standard. And that is it. Next slide. We breezed through that pretty quick. I'm sure there might be some questions out there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sakamoto. Any questions of the council of the presentation? Councilmember Dornbecker, you're leaning in.
Yes, thank you. I was wondering how many of the residents who need this help make $60,000 a year? Do you have that answer?
Yep, demographic wise, no, it'd be hard to come up with that right now, unfortunately.
Mayor, Council, what we would be doing is much like we did our outreach. This is the same kind of income eligible criteria that we've been using in place with our relatively successful mobile home rehabilitation program. So what we would anticipate is a communications outreach, and then also to a number of we have Napa Valley Community Housing, we have the Hopper Creek Apartments, all of which we know have targeted residents that are lower income. So we would be making them aware of the program and the cost, and then have to evaluate their eligibility. So this is a new venture for the town, to be perfectly honest. It's something that the city of Napa has done in their organization. And you may recall they actually have done the same thing that we're talking about this meeting at their last council meeting. But this would be our first foray into direct rental assistance. So it really is going to those on the lower income that are already probably in some subsidized housing program. And as Jonathan mentioned, we're really trying to make up the difference from the people that probably were working in the hospitality industry, lost their job, and don't have even the ability to pay the affordable rent that they're paying. That is principally the target audience that we're seeing. And there may be a few others that we become aware of, but we will be doing outreach to the business community to let their employers know. And again, that income status, it's also, it moves based on size of family, number of dependents, et cetera.
Thank you. Councilmember Durham and then Vice Mayor. Councilmember Durham first.
Yeah, first of all, you said it was going to help 15 to 20 people. So is your opinion then that it's going to go out to about 20 households in Yountville?
Yeah, based on the estimates of what we think we would be assisting for the families, about 20 households would be what we figure the program could afford at $250,000 in a year.
And you said there's a homeowner wait list for the other program that we're already participating with for mostly the manufactured homes communities that we have in town. Is this going to affect them at all or pull their funds?
It won't pull their funds, but you know, if we were to reroute even more funding away from it, that might have an effect.
All right.
Yeah, and if I could, that's a very good point to share, Councilmember Durham. We're not eliminating the rental rehabilitation program. It will still be there with $250,000 in funding. And I will point out to you that in some years, you know, that program only helped 6 to 10 people because the value of the project. So again, this is, you know, it's a tool. We may be able to look at it and see where, you know, if we have less interest in the rehabilitation program. And I will point out that we've been very successful with our partners with the city of Napa and have exhausted all the previous grants with rehabilitation. So it is a smaller niche market just because you have to have that income eligibility, and a lot of folks we have helped. So we're not going to be naive and tell you that it's enough for everybody, but we will be able to, I think, help a significant number weather the storm. We also are in a process, and I know it gets confusing, so I'll apologize, because we have a tendency to apply for $500,000 grants, but we're in the next cycle in the process and we're waiting for the grant approval, and we would anticipate doing the same thing with that grant should it be approved, which would give us additional funding. Like I say, this is a brand new effort for us. You know, we certainly know that we start with 60 rent controlled, or if you will, income controlled rental properties. So any of those potentially are good targets if they've lost their jobs. So, I mean, I'm just saying that's a simple starting point. We also know that a lot of them are seniors. And while that may sound, seniors aren't losing their benefits in their jobs. So their income and their ability to maintain their rent is not at jeopardy compared to the working individuals. But I mean, to be fair, you know, this is going to be a new effort for us, and we're excited to do this, recognizing that there is the need in our community.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Dorman.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. On the manufactured homes, those are, the homes are owned and the land is leased. Would this apply to the land leases?
Correct. Yeah, this would be to help pay space rent.
And that's
And when you say,
assuming the landlord agrees or the property owner agrees?
Correct. Yeah. So both parties, the park management and the mobile homeowner themselves, would need to agree to the program.
and when you say it's all online, I have found, doing some recent outreach myself, that some folks are not really online. So how do you help them get online if they say they don't have a computer or they don't have a smartphone? Or how do we do that?
So our staff is currently geared up and ready to help people assist over the phone. So walk them through the process with them on the phone, getting them logged in, getting them entered, and using their phone number as their primary source of contact rather than their email address.
And Vice Mayor, we've also had very effective outreach where we offer to help some of those individuals, walk them through it. We've done that actually with some of the rental rehabilitation applications. So when we do that, and again, that's probably, I'm going to go out here and say that's steered a bit more towards some of the senior side of it, but we'll certainly work on the outreach. We've done a very good job of helping people navigate that, and that'll be part of, we can make sure that information is both digitally distributed and hard copies, especially in the park. We can certainly put them in their individual mailbox and have a note to contact the live person if they need some guidance.
Thank you. And then this is sort of more an overarching question. We have one pool of money, the $250,000, and it serves two pools of rental relief or rental assistance applicants. One is the what I call the COVID pool, and they are the ones who their income has been reduced by at least 30% because of the pandemic. They're already in place and they will be put into a lottery. And then we have another pool that is the other guidelines, the 60% to 80% AMI, et cetera. If we don't have enough people in the first pool, then is all of the money distributed to the second pool, to the other pool?
Right. So you're for the first pool of the 30% affected by COVID and able to lease in place, that is the preference. So that would be the first people assisted. If there isn't enough of them, then we would go to the second pool that you had mentioned.
So this, in addition to being a COVID response, is also an overall rental assistance program that the town is venturing into.
Yes,
Can
it
be.
is just another tool to help. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And I just, there is something in the staff report I just want to call out. I talked about this with Director Liston. The staff report mentioned a first-time home buying program, but none of this, we don't have that program here in town. This is a rental assistance program.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
What I will share, Vice Mayor, is the town did have a first-time homebuyer program, and a lot of those criteria and history are still footnoted, so that's probably where that came from.
Thank you. Any other questions of council of the presentation? Seeing no other blue hands. Michelle, did we receive any public comments on this item?
No, we did not.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sakamoto, thank you very much for the presentation and well navigated with Daniel's assistance there. Very, very nicely done. Is there action to be had by the council? Is there a motion? Councilmember, again, Dornbecker, I think I see you leaning into the mute button, so please.
Okay, I move that we adopt resolution number 20-3983, approving amendment to the 2018 application to the California State Department of Housing and Community Development for a grant of up to $500,000 under the Home Investment Partnership Program in response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion by Councilmember Dornbecker, second by Councilmember Mueller. Michelle, a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Councilmember Dornbecker.
Yes.
Councilmember Mueller.
Yes.
Councilmember Durham.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Dorman.
Yes.
Mayor Dunbar.
Yes.
Thank you.
That does pass unanimously. Thank you very much. Again, Mr. Sakamoto, thank you very much for helping explain the details, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you all so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We are going to move on to an item that was previously addressed as the Yountville Finance Authority, item 10B, which is 20-2526, Lease Revenue Bonds Series 2013. Consider adoption of resolution number 20-3984, approving the form and authorizing the execution of certain lease financing documents in connection with the refunding of the outstanding Yountville Finance Authority Lease Revenue Bonds Series 2013, and authorizing and directing certain actions with respect thereto. As I mentioned, we did have two guests with us, Mr. Jeff White and Mr. Brian Quint, that worked with staff on this item, and so I will invite our staff to kick off this item. Steve, are you going to start with what we already talked about?
I am. Thank you, Mayor Council. Again, what we have before you is an effort on the part of the town staff to be proactive and identify potential savings. And in February of 2013, the town, through its Yountville Finance Authority, issued $4,260,000 in debt for the seismic retrofit of historic Town Hall and the reconstruction of streets and replacements of sewers on Madison and Yount Streets. And that was approximately a 14-year debt instrument. And we're midway through that, or 7 years through. As part of our effort annually with our financial advisor, we review and look at some things. In February, we'd identified this as a possible opportunity to potentially save a modest amount given current interest rates. And I say that because the debt now is a little over $2 million, and we're reaching 7 years, so the opportunity to recover costs are limited. But we looked at some private placement, and we were in February beginning the process, and we had anticipated that we would have a net savings of about $60,000. And as we were in the process, the COVID-19 situation hit, and the market has changed a little bit. And as a result, the placement is now with the good news is with a local regional bank, West America, but the savings are going to come in at about $46,000. And as the Vice Mayor had noted, there are fixed transaction costs, and we've worked for this. And obviously, for those of you that refinance your house or something, this is a very similar transaction, and you might note that the fixed cost for the transaction, some parts are negotiable. We've been working with our partners to get the fee as low and until we finalize. But the net effect is that it will save the town and the ratepayers $46,000 over the remaining 7-year term, versus doing nothing. Then we would continue to pay approximately 40,000 more. And earlier, the Finance Authority expressed support for moving forward. Happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Thank you. I also wanted to invite our Finance Director, Celia King, in case there was anything additional you wanted to share.
No, I think Steve covered it. I think it's a really good opportunity that we've been presented with. I think that amount of savings at $46,000 would be very beneficial to the general fund, especially in this uncertain time. And I encourage council to move forward.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions of either Celia or Steve on this item? I know we did spend a bit of time earlier today as the Finance Authority discussing this. Any questions? Michelle, did we receive any public comments on this item?
No, we did not, Mayor.
Thank you. So if there's no further discussion, is there action to be had? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll raise my hand, make a motion. We approve resolution number 20-3984, resolution of the town of Yountville approving the form and authorizing the execution of certain lease financing documents in connection with the refunding of the outstanding Yountville Finance Authority lease revenue bonds, series 2013, and authorizing and directing certain actions with respect thereto.
I'll second.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Moeller, second Councilmember Dornbecker. Roll call vote, please, Michelle.
Thank you. Councilmember Moeller?
Yes.
Councilmember Dornbecker?
Yes.
Councilmember Durham?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Dorman?
Yes.
Mayor Dunbar?
Yes.
Thank you.
And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We're going to move on now to our next item, which is item 10C, number 20-2510, cannabis ordinance discussion and possible direction regarding the town council placing one or two ballot initiatives on the November 2020 election regarding cannabis retail businesses. And as a note, this item is for discussion only. No formal action will be taken. I know we have, and we'll reference this in a moment, but we definitely received some public comment on this item, and so we'll be referencing that, but we will start first with staff report.
Very briefly, Mayor, and Council, this is the beginning of the process for you to finalize the proposed ballot language. And I think it's important that the community understand that the discussion you're having today is, as you alluded to, not going to result in a finished product. You will not be finishing and adopting an ordinance, but you're going to be working on a series of questions that town staff has for you with regard to how you want to proceed with the proposed ballot language. The town council has made a decision that they are going to place an initiative on the November ballot. So this will have to be crafted. And right now, staff and the town attorney's office have proposed a draft starting point. Town Attorney Bell is going to lead you through a discussion. There's a number of questions and nuances and different ways that the council can choose to go about this. But I also want to make sure that the public realizes that the language is going to go on the ballot, and then the public will vote on it in November. So this is not the council. So even when you approve the language that's going on, you are not adopting and allowing cannabis retail. You have made a commitment to the community that it's going to go on the fall November 2020 ballot, but we have to take a certain level of action in order to create the ballot language. And then there's also a process that once you finish this particular ordinance, then we will move forward with the summary and the language associated with the actual ballot opposition, support, rebuttal arguments that would come in the June, July timeframe. So with that, I'll turn it over to Town Attorney Bell, and he will walk you through a number of the questions that he has for you with regard to where you would like to take this discussion.
Before you do that, okay, I just see that Councilmember Moeller, you took down your raised hand, so that was left over from before. Cannot hear you right now, Councilmember.
Mayor Dunbar, I lowered the hand, assuming it was from the previous item. If that's not correct, then Councilmember Mueller can raise her hand again.
Thank you for lowering my hand.
You're welcome.
Great. Go ahead,
You're
Gary.
All right, Mayor and council members, before you this afternoon, there are 2 ordinances in the staff report that have been provided. I'll provide an overview of what's in those ordinances, some of the options that the council has before to make modifications to these if the council desires before these are placed on the ballot. I'll discuss and can answer questions about the process and what it looks like once the election is called and once this is placed on the ballot. And to get some final points of clarity on what the council would like to include at this stage and what the council could do after it passes or need not include at this stage if that's something the council wants to do. And feel free to stop me at any point in this to give more detail too. So there are 2 ordinances before you. The ordinance is the actual law that will become codified in the municipal code and will be an enforceable part of the municipal code if and when the voters approve the ballot measure. Once the final language is approved by the council, a special election will be called. It will be consolidated with the general municipal election for November. When that election is called in a resolution, similar to when you call your general municipal election for electing members of the council, there will be a ballot question, which is the 75-word question that voters actually vote on, yes or no, and check the box in your ballot. And that's also the time when there will be arguments for and against and rebuttal arguments and the other process that the town typically goes through for ballot measures generally. So I'll talk about the first ballot measure, which is the regulatory, what I'll call the regulatory framework for cannabis. It's the one that creates the cannabis, the commercial cannabis permit system, and also creates the land use regulations in Title 17, which is the use permit requirement. So this ordinance, as it is right now, contains quite a bit of specific regulations about the business. It could contain fewer, it could contain more. We have left in the language that's in here based on prior discussions and direction from the council, but it could be changed further if the council wishes before it's placed on the ballot. There is the authority in this ordinance for the council to adopt regulations to further its purposes and also to flesh out details to the extent that's needed after the fact. That may be necessary for the application process specifically. So if the voters adopt this, there's going to be a process. It's already outlined in here roughly about a ranking system and a merit-based ranking system, and that the highest ranked applicant may be awarded, but not necessarily be awarded a permit to operate. They'd still need to get a use permit too. But for example, that might be an opportunity for regulations to flesh out what that would look like. That might include bringing in an outside firm to actually run that process and to do the scoring and to review the applications and to submit an highest ranked applicant based on the scoring criteria that the council sets. That could be additional regulations for the operation of the business. It could be some other process that we haven't even thought about yet, depending on what the council wants to do once this goes into place. So there is regulatory authority for the council under this ordinance in the future. One of the questions is on Title 17 for the use permit conditions, which are included in here right now. The language mirrors very closely what the other zones are regulated, as the other zones are regulated in Title 17. So it includes a designation for an overlay zone, the cannabis overlay zone. It includes conditions that must be included in each use permit for it. It includes findings that must be made by the council before that use permit can be granted. And those are the same as for use permits in any other of the zones that exist here in the town. This ordinance doesn't currently create a cannabis overlay zone. When adopting use permit regulations for use in a zone, it does need to apply somewhere. And so we've referenced the cannabis overlay zone, not because the council has made that decision yet, but because we need to specify where those regulations will apply in the future or during this process. So not to confuse the issue too much, the council could create a cannabis overlay zone and propose that as part of this ballot measure for adoption by the voters, or the council could wait until after this is approved, if it's approved, and then adopt a cannabis overlay zone, which the use permit regulations in Title 17 here would apply to. Alternatively, the council could take out the use permit requirements that are in here right now and adopt those later as well. So there's a lot of options on what to include and how much to include. And because that's really a question of policy and discretion for the council, that's why we're having the discussion here this afternoon. So I'll pause there on that ordinance, and then I can move on to the cannabis business license tax or answer questions on this now, whatever the council prefers.
I'd like us to ask questions on this piece now. But when we get to the tax ordinance, I'm assuming you're going to explain the impacts having two elements to a single measure and the limitations there. So we'll worry about that, I think, in a moment after we talk about the second one. Let's ask questions and then receive public comment on this item first. So I see Vice Mayor Dorman's blue hand.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bell, for the presentation. Just following up on your last comment, we could adopt a use permit scheme at a later date. Mm-hmm. Did I understand that correctly?
You did, yes.
So this could be just what we're calling Chapter 9, 9.30, and then our amendments to Chapter 17 could come later in time.
Correct. And I'll provide just a little bit of background on that, on why it's currently drafted the way it is, which might help with the analysis on it. So Chapter 9.30 creates the permit system, which is an annual permit, is not necessarily renewed, can be revoked or suspended. The use permit section in Title 17, as you know, use permits run with the land, but one of the conditions in that use permit system requires a permit under Section 9.30. The reason why they were drafted at the same time and are currently included in there is to ensure that you must have the permit under 9.30 to operate, but the use permit allows the council to impose conditions on a business by business basis after you see an application and have had a chance to have a public hearing with the applicant and make a decision about what's best after you know the location of the business and the details of how the business will be operated. That's the benefit of the use permit, is that you can make those decisions and regulate it in conditions in a use permit once the application is submitted. And so this has both components to ensure that it doesn't necessarily continue forever, because you need the annual permit to do it. That's a condition of the use permit, but you also retain the authority to regulate it on a case-by-case basis through the use permit process that you're all very familiar with. So that's why they're both included in here, but they don't necessarily have to be.
Okay. And then that brings up another question. We have two things called permits. We have a regulatory permit and we have a use permit, correct?
Correct.
And then we have just the general verb to permit something.
Correct.
So I got sort of, as close as I am to this, I got a bit confused reading through particularly Chapter 9, the proposed Chapter 9, because to me that's more like a license. But should we stick with calling it a permit, a regulatory permit? Is that better?
Well, it is a regulatory permit in sort of the technical speak of it. So we have used the word permit because that is what it is. And there are other things that the business would need that are also a license. So the business would also need a business license, for example. So that's not included in here, but that's a requirement that applies to all businesses. So yes, permit is used twice. We've used the term consistently throughout. So we don't just refer to a permit. We talk about the commercial cannabis permit always when we do it, to try to distinguish between the two. But yes, they are both a permit. A use permit's a term of art under Title 17, and this is a newly created permit under Chapter 9.30.
Thank you. And now I did notice in some places it talks about the town manager might make regulations or the town council might make regulations. What is the difference in those two processes?
The difference in those two processes is if The town manager does it. It's done at the staff level. That doesn't require a meeting of the council, and it can be done more quickly and changed more quickly. His authority under the proposed draft is more limited than the council's authority. The council can adopt regulations on anything related to the ordinance. The town manager's authority is limited to things like security, I believe, and a couple other limited cases. The thinking, oh, and operational requirements as well. So things like the quantity of cannabis on site and other things. The thinking in the drafting of it was that there were some things that might require very quick town action, and that's really only possible if it's done at the staff level. Because if we have to call a meeting or wait for a regular meeting, that can be a week or two, and there could be a security issue that needs to be addressed very quickly, and that would be able to be done at the staff level in a way that we just couldn't do as quickly at the town council level. But that's a discretion for you guys on whether or not to include that or not.
And on the rankings that you talked about, right now it's set up, I think, that the town manager ranks and brings it to the council. And the way I read it, and it's 9.30.050D, that the way I read it is, if the town manager brings us an applicant ranked as number one, our only choice is to say yes or no to that applicant for the regulatory permit. As I read it under the way it's currently set up is we can't say, the council cannot say, you know, I disagree with your ranking, and we would like to offer a permit to your second ranked applicant. Am I correct that that's how it's set up right now?
So you're correct that that's what the ordinance language says. My only caveat to that is that there's the ability to adopt regulations. So if this were passed, the council could adopt regulations to specify that it could go to the second applicant or the third, or because you'll also necessarily be adopting the ranking criteria after this is passed. That's not included in here either, and that's envisioned for a later time. You'll probably recall that was previously included in a resolution that the council considered, but resolutions can't be adopted by the voters, so it's not in here. So the regulations could specify that it goes to the second applicant, for example. Alternatively, the council could just simply amend the ordinance to specify that, either now before it's placed on the ballot or after it's approved. Either one's allowed.
And I'm imagining that one decision you would like from us tonight is on-site consumption, because my memory is we've included it in here. And if we were to decide not to include it in here, that would necessitate some changes. For example, on the license disqualification, I think I read the current version as saying it's automatically disqualified an application if it does not allow on-site. So some things like that would change depending on the on-site or not.
Yes, if the council does not want to permit on-site consumption, that is definitely a change that we'll need to make throughout the entire ordinance.
Okay, and finally on the zoning that you mentioned, or the overlay, if we do an overlay in connection with this ordinance, can we take out what I call the buffer references, 300 feet from here and 100 feet from there, and just say your business has to be in the CAN overlay?
So I will, two responses to that. The council will need to adopt some zone in which this is allowed, either an overlay zone or in an existing zone somewhere in town. That's going to have to happen either before it goes before the voters or after it goes before the voters. As far as the buffer zones go, the state law states that there is a 600 foot, I believe it's 500 for medical and 600 for recreational foot buffer between certain things. Sensitive zones, we'll call them, schools and churches and parks and the like, or youth centers. But state law also says that you can change those distances if you'd like. So if the intent is to have no buffer zone at all, then we'll need to specify that somewhere, that you are making a conscious decision to make no buffer zone, because otherwise the state law one will by default apply.
Ah, okay, thank you. And then still on the buffer zone issue, and this is in the use permit portion of 17.62.040C, it says no cannabis retail business may be located on a property that directly abuts a residential zoning district, except that a cannabis retail business may be located on a property directly abutting the rear yard of a private residence. Can you put that in plain language for me, please? Because it sounds like the beginning of it is saying something different from the end.
Yeah, so I believe that this language was settled on based on prior discussions with the ad hoc committee and the council. And part of it is the review of the maps on the possible locations where it could go. And so if you looked at the sensitive zones that the council had selected, so that's in the next subdivision there, subdivision D. If you looked at those sensitive zones and you drew a 300-foot buffer around all of them, and then you looked at the universe of places where this business could be located, the options are dwindling. And so part of why this is included in there is to ensure that, yes, the general rule is that you can't be against a property that abuts, meaning touches a residentially zoned property. So I think that's going to be on like the north side of town if it's in the commercial zone. But it can abut the rear yard. And so, yes, those two things seem to conflict, but it couldn't abut the front yard of a residentially zoned property, but it could abut the backyard under the way this is currently drafted.
And just again, this is sort of more generally, excuse me, when we talk about violations in particular, we talked about what can happen if we violate this chapter. Or so in regard to that, would it be all right to add, or does it already mean not just this chapter 9 or this chapter 17, but our Yountville Municipal Code in its entirety, as well as all applicable state and other local laws? Just, is that our general meaning as you understand that we ask you to draft it? That, and the same thing is relying, a lot of times we say if you have another cannabis business here in town that has had a problem, then that's a violation. Could we expand that to say if you have a cannabis business even in another jurisdiction where you've had a problem, then we can make certain decisions like a suspension or revocation of the permit?
So
the regulatory permit.
Right. So the current scoring criteria, well, I shouldn't say the current scoring criteria. The scoring criteria that the council previously reviewed and common scoring criteria and requirements for applicants are that they not have had issues owning these types of businesses elsewhere as a condition of applying or as part of the scoring process. That's very common. And the scoring criteria that we had previously drafted included such a requirement. I think you would run into some due process issues if they were operating a business completely lawfully here and were operating within all the requirements and conditions and the Yountville Municipal Code and state law, and then you sought to revoke based on a violation elsewhere, simply because they wouldn't be violating, under the hypothetical as I understand it, they wouldn't be violating anything about their business here in town.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Very helpful.
And Gary, if I remember the proximity abutting properties, we were using a couple of specific examples about the Ranch Market property as an example where there's a large space that surrounds an existing structure. The structure would have a significant distance away from the nearest residential. The property lines would abut, but the existing facility would not. I think that was one of the examples we were discussing about that, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Durham, I see your hand is raised.
You know, sorry, most of these are comments for when the time comes to discuss it, so I can wait. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions of the staff reports from council? Seeing no others. Michelle, do we have a specific, I think we'd like to, if we have any public comments, I'd like to introduce those now so that the council can consider those while we're having further deliberation.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to minimize my screen and go to what we have saved in our public comment folder. These are items that I've sent previously to council. And then in addition, we have two resting in our public comment email that I will switch to once I'm done reading these items, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And while you're adjusting your screen, Michelle, I'll just remind folks that all the public comments that have been submitted will, of course, be part of the record. Just because they're electronic and virtual doesn't mean that they won't be included in all of this. And so anyway, did I buy you enough time yet, Michelle?
You did. Thank you,
Okay.
Mayor. So the first public comment, these are not in any order, is from a Nancy LaFortune. It says, good afternoon. Please consider approval of ordinances to allow public recreational sales of cannabis products. I am currently driving to Sonoma County. These establishments tend to be extremely well run and are an asset to the communities they serve. It would be attractive to tourists as well. This is the future. Nancy LaFortune, Napa resident. Next one is from Pam Reeves. Dear Council, regarding the cannabis discussion, after reading the staff report, I would like to voice my concern about moving forward with either allowing a cannabis retail outlet in town or putting the question on the ballot. I have said before that the nuances of allowing or not allowing cannabis have not been clearly discussed because we are all imagining something different. The problem with the imaginings is that we never end up with a clear definition of the impact. Especially in these very uncertain financial times, I would hate for the town to make such a potentially character-changing decision based on some perceived economic pressure. If the council determined to table the idea, no one is harmed and the discussion can be had after we explore all the ramifications of the current business and health recovery. I would not like to lock the town into an old paradigm if we must move forward in a much different direction in the next year. Perhaps visitor businesses and the high traffic they create will no longer be king, and the town might reclaim its former resident and community focus. Townspeople will still be able to purchase cannabis products online and in person in Napa, as we must do for many things we all need. The real pressure would appear to come from potential retailers, and I would think that any investment in visitor-oriented businesses would be slow to proceed in this environment. For all of these reasons, I would urge the council to table or postpone any action on this item. Again, this is from Pam Reeves, Yountville resident. Next email is from Warren Pinkert. And this email is, I commend the council for taking steps to put the question of whether or not to allow retail marijuana businesses within the Yountville town limits to a vote of your constituents. Full and open vetting is always the best approach. There are some questions I would like answered before the council votes this afternoon. 1, why did the council choose a very lengthy new ordinance rather than voting on leaving the existing ordinance in force? Number 2, was there a discussion and vote of the council to choose between the two approaches? At the March 3rd, 2020 council meeting, the mayor indicated it could be either. Number 3, is there a draft on the wording of the initiative for the November ballot? If so, when will it be published? Number 4, do any council members have any financial interest in any real marijuana businesses? Number 5, will each council member state their reasons? Excuse me, let me start over. Will each council member state their reasoning for voting yes or no on the final initiative adopted. Thank you, Warren. My next comment was sent from Whitney Diver McAvoy with the Yountville Chamber of Commerce. Mayor Dunbar and council members, the Yountville Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors will not be taking a position for or against a cannabis retail business in Yountville. That said, we do support placing a cannabis retail business ordinance on the November ballot to allow the voters to decide if a cannabis retail business should be allowed in Yountville. We thank the town council and town staff for their leadership and thoughtful approach to this issue. Many discussion workshops, office hours, etc. have taken place where cannabis has been discussed. Our community has had multiple opportunities to provide feedback. We believe it is time to move forward with a decision regarding a cannabis retail business in Yountville. Thank you, Whitney Diver McAvoy, President and CEO of the Yountville Chamber of Commerce. Next, Mayor, I'm going to switch over to the public comment email, and I'm going to read two that I have there that we received after my last transmission to council. The next one is from Lindsay Gallagher, and this says, to the Yountville Town Council, on behalf of the hospitality community, pardon me, this one's incorrect. I'm going to cancel that one. That was for hot air balloons. Pardon me. Next public comment email is from Bruce Donsker. And let me make sure this is about cannabis. Yes. In the May 5th, it says, thank you for the opportunity to communicate in these challenging times. In the May 5th Yountville Town Council staff report, the town manager stated, quote, ... there has been vigorous and engaging public feedback from those opposed to and those in support of the possibility of the town allowing a cannabis retail business. At the same time, number one, there has been one, possibly two speakers in favor of cannabis retail at council meetings, parentheses, excluding those living out of town or directly tied to the business, close paren, versus dozens against. Number two, there has been one positive comment in letters to the editor versus dozens against. Number three, after requesting via the town's Public Records Act request copies of all cannabis related emails to the mayor and council, none were in favor that were disclosed. I would appreciate the council sharing where all of this vigorous and positive support of cannabis retail is so that we can all learn. Again, thank you, Bruce Donsker, Yountville residents. Thank you. That's it, Mayor.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Are there any other questions specifically of the first attachment, the one ballot measure, Councilmember Dornbecker?
Thank you. I'm directing this question to our town attorney, Gary Bell. Thank you for your presentation. Can you please be specific about the form that these initiatives on the ballot take, and can all of the wording of this proposed ordinance be included on the ballot? That's my question.
Yeah, so the full text of the ordinance will be included. There are some limitations, but I don't think this ordinance is long enough for it not to be included. And so when you think about the voter information pamphlet that you receive before you vote, it talks about the measures at the beginning, and it has the ballot question. And then after the arguments in support and opposition and rebuttals, there's the actual full text of the ordinance and also an impartial analysis to accompany it. And so the full text of the law will be included in the voter information packet. And then the ballot has the ballot question on it. The ballot question, as I mentioned earlier, is only 75 words, and it must be a fair and impartial synopsis of the purpose of the entire ordinance. And so there's a lot of thought that goes into those 75 words because you have to be fair and impartial, and it has to be a synopsis of the whole thing. But the actual text of the ordinance is included in the voter information guide. And that's the language that looks like an ordinance towards the end of the information about that ballot measure. And so that will be included.
And do you draft that synopsis or do?
So initially, yes, I work with the town clerk and also other staff, and that's in drafting the resolution that calls the election and places the measure on the ballot. That includes the ballot question in that resolution where you call the election. And so once the language is finalized, I will work with the town clerk and also town staff to make sure that it is a fair and impartial synopsis. It doesn't exceed the 75 words. As Michelle knows, there's also some technical rules on how you count words. Sometimes multiple words are actually one word. So you actually have to sit down and go through it and read the rules to figure out how to meet those requirements.
And will that be made public before it goes on the ballot, or will it only become public on the ballot?
It will be public before it goes on the ballot because it will be part of the resolution that you all adopt when you call the election. And so I believe that's the second meeting in June. I think it's currently planned to call the election. Michelle's nodding her head, so the answer is yes. So when that resolution is before you to call the election, among other things, it will place these ballot measures on the ballot, and it will include in that resolution the ballot question for each of them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Gary, as an add-on to that question and answer, does the Napa County Elections Officer also review the language of the measure for accuracy?
And by measure, do you mean the ordinance itself or the ballot question?
The ballot question.
So yes, the elections official will do some check, and Michelle might be able to jump in on their role. But yes, they will generally jump in on the number of words to make sure you're within 75. They'll help with the counting of them and the other technical requirements. But my experience is that they don't discuss the substance of it so much unless there's a clear violation of law in some respect. So they're more concerned with the technical requirements being met before it goes on the ballot.
And before Michelle chimes in, but there may be some folks that say the language is fair, and there may be some folks that say the language is not fair. That's ultimately determined by the town clerk and town attorney. Then is that what you're saying? With confirmation by the elections officer?
Yeah, so we will draft it based on those requirements to include it in the resolution. Ultimately, it's up to you all to adopt it under the standards of the elections code. And so, yeah, I mean, the reasonable minds can differ, but fair and impartial also has a meaning under the elections code and the case law that applies to this. And argumentative and persuasive words are not allowed. And so you can imagine what types of words those are, best, great, good for, these types of words that would tend to be persuasive or argumentative. Fair and impartial being just a statement of what it does. This is an ordinance that does the following things. Do you want to adopt it? That's essentially what a fair and impartial synopsis is.
Michelle, any further?
No, I think the town attorney answered correctly and all of that, and I agree with his comments.
Thank you. Are there any, sorry, did I hear any additional questions about this ballot measure language in this first attachment? If not, we can move on to the license tax ordinance language and how the two would potentially be related.
Yeah, so the second ordinance in front of you is a business license tax ballot measure. It imposes an up to 3% gross receipts tax on cannabis retail businesses. I say up to 3% because the ordinance includes the ability to impose less than 3% if that's something that the council wants to do in the future. As you know, the voters need to approve tax rates. And so by seeking approval of up to 3%, the council could have the discretion to move within that approved range. Gross receipts is all the income that they receive. It's defined there in the ordinance. And I'll talk a little bit about the business license tax ballot measure and how it works with the other one. This could be all included in a single ballot measure placed before the voters. That is permissible. There are different requirements for a tax and what information can be included in there and how it is approved. In this case, it's a general tax, and so it needs approval of a majority of voters to pass. That's the same voting threshold as your ordinance. It also requires a majority. And so for that reason, it might be easier to combine it than it would be, for example, for a special tax, which would have a slightly higher threshold than your ordinance and might not be as advisable to combine it. One of the reasons why the council might consider leaving them separated like this is that the ballot question that I was just referring to with the question from Councilmember Dornbecker is limited to 75 words. And for a tax measure, it has to include 3 specific types of information. It has to include the tax rate. It has to include the duration of the tax. And so if it's indefinite, then that has to be stated. If it's a limited term tax, that has to be stated. And then it also has to include the estimated annual revenue to be raised by the tax. Now, those 3 things included within the 75 words, and it also has to include the words shall the measure, and then information, including those 3 pieces of information, be adopted. So you already have 5 words with what the statute requires, and now you're filling the other with 70. If you combine these 2 into one, those remaining 70 words have to include the 3 pieces of information about the tax, and then also all the other information about the regulatory aspects of the ordinance, because you're also imposing permit requirements. You have a selection process. There's a use permit process. There's a process for suspending, revoking, renewing, and appealing those decisions. And there's regulatory authority. And so you quickly run out of words to include in the ballot question. And so it might be difficult to include enough information in 75 words. It's not impossible, and we can certainly get creative with how to, in 75 words, meet the requirements if this were combined into a single ballot measure, and staff would do that if that's what the council wants. Currently, as it's drafted, the business license tax only takes effect if the other ballot measure is approved and goes into law. So theoretically, if both of these went on the ballot, the regulatory scheme could be adopted and the tax could be rejected. And then the cannabis businesses would be allowed under the regulatory scheme, but would not be taxed except for sales taxes and all the other taxes that otherwise apply. Or both could be approved, and in which case they would be approved and also pay the up to 3% business license tax. And if the business license tax is only approved and the regulatory ballot measure is not, then the business license tax is drafted so that it doesn't take effect if the other one does not get approved. So in that off chance, even if the voters approved it, it would not take effect.
And the 2 questions, one would be, so you've explained the reason that you would potentially separate the 2. It's principally because of the 75-word limit in the ballot question. Is there an advantage or disadvantage of the consolidation of the 2 or the separation of the 2? That's the first compound question I have for you. I think I'll let you address that, and then I have another question.
So one of the advantages of combining it is that there are fewer ballot measures to vote on. Generally, there can be information overload and providing too many ballot measures. And I don't know how many others will be on the ballot for this fall. I don't think anybody does until the county does what they're going to do and the state does what they do. And so it very well could be that there are many ballot measures and statewide propositions on the same ballot. Having more to vote on might lead to a different result than having fewer to vote on. So one of the considerations is to have only one question, yes or no, might be an easier decision one way or the other than having 2. Separating them out has the benefit of not having the tax question included in the regulatory scheme. In other words, the views on the tax measure will not affect the vote on the regulatory scheme if they are separated, whatever those views may be. So those are the pros and cons as I see it. I'm sure there's others too.
And that leads to my next question, which is the reason behind the business license tax at all. And if you could explain the value of that tax basically being a local revenue tax versus the others you listed as state or county or state taxes, that money goes away, we don't see it, or how that relationship would work.
Yeah, that's right. So the business license tax is similar to TOT in that way. Returns are filed with the town and paid directly to the town. And it's not like a sales tax. And as you all know, especially going on right now, sales tax is sometimes kept or delayed by the state and not remitted even when the town's owed it. And so this money stays local. It doesn't go to the state to be remitted back. And it is a general tax, meaning that it can be spent for any lawful purpose of the town. It's not earmarked for a specific thing. So this would be general tax revenue to the town to be used on anything the town council sees fit, and that's also lawful.
Great, thank you. Question from Councilmember Durham.
Can you speak to the public comment statement about why the lengthy new ordinance does that come back to the fact that this ordinance is on there because it's an ordinance, and what we had discussed in previous council meetings was a resolution? Is that correct to that answer?
Well, so to answer the question that I think is being asked, which is why is this ordinance so long and why is it being included or considered? I think that there might be, I think it might be important to clarify that an ordinance is always needed to pass a law. And so when voters vote on a ballot question, the 75-word question that we've been discussing, that is not the law. All that does is approve or disapprove an actual ordinance that exists somewhere, because only ordinances become law, and the town council needs to place an ordinance before them to vote yes or no on. The ballot question, it might be as far as some people go, but technically speaking, if you vote yes on a ballot question, what you're really doing is approving the text of an ordinance that exists somewhere, and usually in your voter information guide. So the ordinance is necessary in order for the voters to approve this. The only other option would be a ballot question, and that's a separate process and beyond the scope of the question I was asked. So I'll leave it there.
I think we're all, with myself being at the top of the list, getting an after-school special, I'm just a bill here on Capitol Hill understanding of this, because I can say with myself, the majority of the times I've never read the ordinances. So that's exactly what we're doing here, is understanding exactly how this full process plays out. And this is the beginning of that process for this town council.
Yes.
Thank you.
And if I'll follow up on Councilmember Durham's question. If I recall correctly, the question was asked in one of our many public conversations in council meetings and in the standing committee meetings. Also, the question was, why are you doing this? There's already something on the books. And it was made clear multiple times. I think it was made quite clear that was a placeholder language in response to the original Prop 64 state-approved law that would have taken away local permit authority had we not taken some type of action. So the action we took, and we agreed at the time it would be a placeholder for further consideration, that we would say, basically to oversimplify, we would say no to everything, and we would review later what we might say yes to. For example, allowing delivery from out of town anyway, licensed businesses. So we'd already made a modification to the original placeholder, and now this is an additional potential modification if approved. So I think Councilmember Durham was on the then ad hoc committee at that time when it first came up, and has since been discussed multiple times since then. Councilmember Dornbecker?
Yes, Gary, can you clarify if both the ordinance and the tax are on the ballot, and the ordinance is passed and the tax is not, what is the repercussion of that?
Then businesses would be allowed under the scheme that was adopted with a permit and a use permit is currently drafted, but they would not be subject to a business license tax.
The local tax revenue disappears.
Correct.
Yeah, there's still state taxes. I don't know if there's still county tax on that.
Shouldn't be.
Yeah, and then sales tax, which isn't allowed on medical only, I believe is correct. Is that right?
That is correct, yes. No sales tax on medicinal, but this would be adult use, so it would be subject to tax.
Any other questions on this? So we've covered both of the attached ordinances as presented. One last check with Michelle. I don't know that we were accepting any in-meeting public comments, just confirming that all the public comments we received have been read into the record.
Yes, they have, Mayor.
Thank you. So any further discussion by council? We have two things to consider, but who would like to start the discussion? Whose blue hand is going to go up first? I'm trying to read people's eyes, and it's difficult when I can barely see them. Oh, I get to call on somebody. Is that right? Councilmember Muller's been very quiet during all this, so. Still muted, Councilmember Muller. Nope. There we had you for a second. There you are.
Okay. So, do you want to lay out the two questions you want us to address in any particular order, or you want to take comment? How would you like to handle this?
Let's have discussion on what I'll call the main ordinance, the commercial cannabis ballot measure, and then after that we can discuss the interest in either combining or having separate a business license tax ordinance. So if you have comments on the
okay, well, I think I'll do the easy one first. I think having them separate certainly makes a lot of sense to me. I think certain people like to sit at their kitchen table like I do and read these things, and other people, just call me up and say, how should I vote? So I think having them separate maybe gives people two different things to look at instead of, something really big. So I think keeping them separate just makes sense, thinking about voters and, whether they may like to read stuff or not. So, and then the other one in terms of, I have, I can't find it right now. I thought I looked at my notes. There's some information in here about whether we're going to mandate secondary retail be allowed. And I'm not sure how that would work, because if we have to have, that's why I'm considering asking that to be taken out. It doesn't seem to apply. If you can only be 21 to get in, then we are really limiting it to an adult business that could go into the secondary retail. Was there some discussion I missed on that?
I don't think that
how that would work.
Yeah, to my recollection, the discussion about secondary retail didn't really have anything to do with age restriction. It had to do with a diversity of offerings in that space, similar to what we do in wine tasting rooms. We don't require it in other retail. So when you have a clothing store, you're not required to have something else, or a hat store. It was specific to tasting rooms, wine tasting rooms, and the interest of having a unique and diverse experience in a potential retail cannabis business was the motivation for that. We're not setting the type of business operation with this either. That would only happen if the ordinance is adopted and an applicant brings forward a business operation plan. We're not requiring anything specific that way.
Well, that was my only concern, is not to include that at this time, because what I understood our town attorney to say, that we could always include that later, because we'd be creating a second business within a business that only could be accessed by somebody who's 21 or older.
I'll let Gary comment on that, and then Steve has his hand raised as well.
Yeah, so what I would add is, currently as drafted, the application at the beginning of the process has to include a proposed secondary commercial use in order to even be considered. And that was an early requirement based on discussions from the council early on, so that's still in there. You know, as the process moves along and it gets to the use permit process, once you select the highest ranked person, the use permit process will allow the council to put other conditions like you normally would in a use permit. But but this is set up to screen applicants at the get-go so that they will not make it into the process unless they've also proposed that secondary use.
Within that space. Yeah, that just seems, I'm not sure if I'm in full support of that. It just seems that we're just going to have possibly two of the same thing. I think our town manager wants see his hands waving. He'd like to say something.
Yes, as soon as you were going to finish, I was going to call on him. So go ahead, Steve.
Okay.
We're mixing, unfortunately, our historical use of the retail diversity and the secondary retail. The council was having the conversation about how might we consider what you considered plus or something more. In other words, would you have perhaps a cafe? Would you have perhaps a spa? How might you add some of those? So the conversation, and maybe we need to clarify, but really the intent of this is that you all had said you wanted more than just what I'm going to call, because we try not to use the term dispensary, but you wanted something that was a higher qualitative experience, and you wanted to see what they brought to the table. So I would say we may need to strike out the reference to secondary retail in the sense of how we apply it with tasting rooms, but that was part of the qualitative analysis, that you were hoping to get something more than just a basic retail store. So that's been my recollection of following the dialogue as you've gone back and forth on this. So just offering that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks. I guess that was really my major concern. I'd like to have that removed. It's you know, be probably the only business in town that you can't get in the door unless you're 21, and then to have two businesses, you know, one within a business, I think it's too restrictive. So, and if it's something that could be added later at the use permit stage, depending on what we have, then that's really my major concern with everything I read through today. And then, yes, to keeping them separate.
Okay. And Gary, just to confirm, that could be added in separate from the ordinance if based on the type of business activity that is presented by an applicant?
So if a secondary use or a secondary retail could be added as a condition in a use permit, is that the question?
Yes.
Yes. So this is like any other use permit. You can place conditions that are relevant or have a nexus to the use that you're approving, and that can include things regarding their operations like secondary uses. So in that sense, you can put very similar conditions in this use permit as you would be for any other use permit you approve.
But we do not have to include it in the ordinance.
You do not have to include it in the ordinance. It's drafted the way that it is right now because we understood from prior direction that that was a prerequisite for the council considering an applicant.
Okay.
And so
Understood.
It's currently a requirement in the application process to make sure that only those people will make it through the process.
And the real intent of that is, I think I was trying to explain anyway earlier, was to create a unique, creative, diverse experience, as Steve was talking about, not just a kind of a baseline traditional concept. We want that creativity, but the secondary retail was clearly meant because there was an abundance of a particular type of business activity. We never had secondary retail in art galleries or when we had an abundance of antique shops. There was never a secondary retail requirement for those. And this was just an attempt to acknowledge additional retail diversity in wine tasting rooms specifically. So we could decide that it's not necessary or appropriate in this case. Councilmember, let's see, we don't have any blue hands up. I get to keep calling on people. Councilmember Durham, looking very intent.
Thank you. So let me just piggyback on what we're on the secondary use. So 70.30.50, number 5, I2, specifically calls out a secondary use. So we've agreed that that's not right. But even what we're doing, if we do move forward with this, is we're telling this, we're only allowing one license. There's only one license allowed for cannabis dispensary, and that's a type 10 retail. A type 10 retail has to live by the state regulations as well as our regulations that we put on it. And it's the most highly regulated business in the state right now. So by telling it has to operate a certain way, it is questionable to me, because I wouldn't tell a restaurateur coming into town that they have to serve Greek food if they want to serve French food. I wouldn't tell them they have to have takeout if they want to do sit down. So I think more of the discussion here on quote unquote secondary use is the application process. That's why this application process and the merit process is so important, that the people applying to have the opportunity for a type 10 retail in Yountville are going to have to give us their business plan, are going to have to give us their business layout and 20 other things that tell us what this business is about. That's how we determine how it's going to fit properly into Yountville and not some other community. So I would like that removed from the, ordinance. You know, once again, 9.30.060 B number 2, it's asking to provide substantial benefit to the community. We might as well ask it to be local serving yet again. We need to get away from this us versus them, tourist versus community mentality with all of our businesses. Every single business in this community provides substantial benefit to the community. I have never, in my 15 years of living here, shopped at IL. It serves no benefit to me, but it serves benefit to major population in this community. So yes, it provides a benefit. We need to get rid of this and realize that through our actions, through our ordinances, through our use permits, that every business here is here for a reason and here for everybody. So all of these, there's 3 references to provide substantial benefit to the community. I think those should be removed. And I want to remind you that in 9.30.050, 5, both I2 and I3, we talk about, once again, a community relations plan, and we talk about a community benefits plan. So right there, they're explaining how they're going to provide substantial benefit to this community. And let's not forget, we're not asking any other business to provide a community relations plan or a community benefits plan. We're only asking a type 10 retailer who's coming into town to do it. So the way I read this, they're above and beyond providing substantial benefit to this community. we're already holding them to a higher standard. And once again, that's going to play out in the application process. So they are going to be able to provide benefits to this community and have a relationship plan, of which I hear mumblings about all the time because certain businesses don't participate or certain businesses don't do their part. We're going to ensure that if this business comes into town, they're going to go above and beyond and be a part of this community that we want them to be and that we would like every business to be. I think that this whole ordinance gives us just enough information, on the use permit, the designs, the CUPs, and the regulatory permit to allow an educated voter to move forward and make a decision based on the wording of how they want a cannabis business in town or not. I don't think we should be adding anything into it, and except for those points that I'd like removed, should be removed. It's interesting to me because one of the public comments asked if we'll all state the reason we're voting, yes or no. And then another public comment talked about retail diversity. And it's interesting, before March 17th, retail was a totally different business than it was 6 months ago, than it was a year ago. And now on May 5th, it's nothing what it was on March 17th. So we as a council have an opportunity to continue to move forward, do what's right for the community, and try to make the right decisions that make sure all of the businesses we have are right for Yountville, and especially create that retail diversity. And of course, I mean, all of the reports I've read up to today is that cannabis retail type 10 shops that are open are all posting month over month, year over year gains. So they are still giving back to their communities, even in this climate. So I also, although I worry about having 25 things to vote on in November, because people can still stand in front of Target and get signatures right now, it's probably, the tax should still be separated out so that we can fully explain what the tax would mean. And I think it's important for people to realize that that 3% is an excise tax that stays in this community, that is for, once again, the benefit of this community and can assist with this community even in a day like today. So those are my thoughts.
Great. Thank you very much. Councilmember Dornbecker.
Thank you. I agree with my colleagues about I don't really see a need to delineate that we need to have additional retail in a store. By my understanding of cannabis retail, there's a variety of things that, they do all offer, like CBD creams and all of that anyway. So that's, to me, that's a moot point. But I am concerned that if we do put these on the ballot separately, that the excise tax that's supposed to benefit the town of Yountville will be voted down, because people are very concerned about the economy right now. And if we give them the opportunity to say, yes, do you want this new business? And they say, yes, yeah, we want this new business. Do you want the excise, to the 3% excise tax to go to Yountville? I don't believe that they'll say yes. I believe that they'll say no. Plus, I believe that it's just as easy to incorporate it into the 75 words that you're going to have for and call it out in the ordinance language that they're going to be voting on, that there will be community benefit, financial community benefit because of this small excise tax. So I disagree with my colleagues there. I think it should be combined and presented as one, because I believe that people who will vote to have the business in town aren't going to say, oh yes, and I really want to pay tax on that. That's how I feel.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll start where we've kind of already been on the secondary retail. I agree of what the genesis of that was, and I agree with my other council members that we can let go of that. To Councilmember Durham's point, variously throughout the ordinance, we use, quote, substantial benefits to town residents, quote, community benefits plan, quote, benefits to residents. So I completely understand and agree with what is that. So what it brought to mind was what we did with the zoning ordinances at our last meeting, and maybe this could be rolled into the community benefits plan, but I think we need to have a list of substantial community benefits, use the same terminology throughout, and let's come up with what we think the benefits are, because obviously this is a controversial business, just as 3 stories are controversial. So we do want something extra from this business. So why don't we just tell them what it is and call it the same thing throughout? So that's kind of my possible solution to that. I also think we need to add a section that just simply says we're going to have one business, because it's buried in there. It says after the ranking, we can issue 1 license or 1 regulatory permit. But I really think somewhere we need to come out and say, we're going to have 1. I also think we should, if we have time, we should roll the cannabis overlay into this to make a clear picture for our voters to say, we're going to have 1 business, it's going to be in this particular overlay. I would like to see, we have a lot of lists in here. What goes into the application? What happens on renewal? What are the operating requirements? I would like to see as many of those lists pared down as possible and put the actual meat on the bone via resolutions, because I think this is a new business for us. We are going to have to learn as we go. I mean, there are some things I think we can agree on now. If we, in an application, sure, we want to see all those things. But I think list all those things and then let us do as necessary resolutions to say, this is what a business plan looks like. This is what a community benefits plan looks like. So to handle it that way. I also think on the ranking, I would like to see us add the language the town attorney discussed to allow us as a council to determine if maybe the 2nd or 3rd ranked applicant, maybe because of these other things, the community benefit plan or the neighborhood output, maybe we really feel that they are the applicant that will fit Yountville best. I would like to keep that discretion open for us. On-site consumption, I do not believe that, I'm not in favor of that going into the ordinance right now. It's not a deal breaker for me, because to me, the most important thing about this discussion is to get something out to our voters for November. But I will just say for me, because we can amend it, I would be more comfortable with it out now so we have some time to learn about that. And as far as the 1 versus 2 initiatives, I really had not thought of what Councilmember Dornbecker said, that maybe we get a business without a tax to support it. But I do hearken back to, we are not looking at this as a financial measure for the town in the sense of an excise tax. We are looking at it, I think, in a broader picture. So I could go either way on 1 or 2 on the ballot measure, because I see all sides of it. And that's where I am.
Thank you. Councilmember Durham, did you have additional comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the Vice Mayor, were you saying that we should put that ranking determination in this ordinance, as well as what the community benefits plan would be?
No, I'm saying that we should do that in a resolution, sort of split the baby, because we mentioned a community benefits plan as part of an application. And then I think we should do, rather than trying to flesh it out in this ordinance like we do, we should just say community benefits plan as determined by resolution, business plan as determined by resolution, so that we then can sit and really think about what is it we want to see when these businesses come in.
Thank you.
I'll ask a follow-up to that. Are you saying that you want the council to be able, so that the town manager would have a recommendation that the council then would be the final decision-making body, as opposed to the town manager being the decision-making body based on the ranking of the applications?
Yes, in a nutshell, I would really appreciate the town manager and staff doing the ranking. And I think 9 times out of 10, we would agree with the ranking, but I would like the flexibility on that 10th time to exercise our discretion if we need to.
Thanks. Gary, I'll ask you about, does that create unintended consequences or anything that's more or less challengeable? Is that equal, in your opinion, to whether it's the town manager or the council for final approval after the town manager were to rank multiple applications?
So I think the suggestion by the vice mayor to add a provision to the ordinance that allows the council to select the second or third or fourth and so on, if the council can't make the findings to select the highest ranked, is a good way to do it if the council would like to have that discretion to go down the list. The reason for that is there is going to be a scoring criteria. Those criteria will be largely objective. I think you saw what they could look like before, and there'll be points awarded or not awarded. The risk is adding a subjective element to that process. But then to also provide reasons why the council is going to the second, third, or fourth applicant, and to give a reasoned basis for why that's happening. And so if the council is deciding, actually, we're going to go with number 2 or number 3, that there is a hearing and a process for the number 1 and number 2 to be heard, and for the council to explain why for those applicants there were reasons that are in the ordinance why they weren't selected. So that's the process that I would recommend, because well, to remove some subjectivity and to try to reduce the risk of a suit, to put it lightly.
And that's what I was going to ask you is, does that add to the challengeability of a decision? If you're the number 1 ranked based on our very objective criteria, and then number 2 or 3 or 4 is selected, doesn't that create the opportunity to say, wait a minute, you're being discriminatory, I ranked highest? Now, especially based on the fact that we have to take low bids from contractors in a similar kind of a bid process.
Yeah, so broadly speaking, yes. Anytime there's a set of criteria that are published and made public and someone meets it and is not selected, would increase the likelihood and the incentive to challenge that decision.
I had a feeling that's what you were going to say.
May I ask a follow-up question, Mayor? Thank you. So, Mr. Bell, as it's written, town manager and staff do the ranking, they bring it to us, we look at applicant ranked number 1, we say we cannot make the findings.
Mm-hmm.
Do we then not have a cannabis business? Or can we go on to applicant number 2?
So under the ordinance as it's currently drafted right now, the town council would have 2 options if that happened. You could reset a new application period and require everyone to resubmit again and restart the process over because you didn't select the highest ranked candidate. Or you could exercise your authority to amend the ordinance or adopt regulations under the ordinance to specify that number 2 or 3 or some other criteria would be used other than top rank to reach the applicant that's eventually selected. Either process could work.
Okay.
And I guess using my example of the low bid process, there is the ability to make a determination that for certain extenuating, I don't know if it's extenuating circumstances, but because of certain circumstances, the non-lowest bid is selected and then explaining those reasons, that is permissible.
It is, yeah. So to analogize further to that process, you have to select the lowest responsible and responsive bidder in a public works competitive bidding situation. And when the apparent low bidder is not selected because they're not responsible, there is a due process hearing that's required, and they have a right to notice and a hearing and a process. So I would recommend the same or a similar process to be used here. If the council's not going to go with the top ranked candidate and you're going to go to number 2 or number 3, that there be a set of standards why the top ranked candidate is not selected, and that candidate have an opportunity at a hearing to come and be heard and have the council explain to them why they're not being selected.
Yeah, it does make me nervous. Most of the stories I've heard over the last couple of years for applicant legal challenges isn't because the highest ranking wasn't selected, it's because all the others weren't. And I think we create another layer of, like I said, to make up the word again, challengeability, because it does take additional explanation. And why wouldn't we have better informed the application process by having the rules written more completely so that we would very objectively take the highest rank? So that part I'm not completely comfortable with. But anyway, yeah, go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Sorry, and I had one other thing, and I'm sorry, I should have raised this earlier. The way I read it set up now, like on renewal of a license, of a regulatory permit that's issued, it's ministerial with the town manager and staff. So what would happen as it's currently written now if council were to disagree with that decision? Or is that sort of the same thing we're discussing now, that has to leave our hands? So
under the ordinances as currently drafted right now, it is the town manager and staff that decides on the renewal application. There's the set of criteria in the ordinance for when something is renewed or not renewed. If those requirements are met, then the permit is renewed for another year. The decision to not renew a permit is appealable to the council. So if the town manager decided not to renew for one of the reasons in the ordinance, that decision could be appealed up to the council for hearing. The decision to renew it is a staff level decision, but that is subject to council control because the council can always amend the ordinance itself, or the council can adopt regulations under the ordinance as well. So you still have control over that process in the sense that it's still up to the 5 of you on what's in the ordinance, whether or not the ordinance exists at all, and what regulations are adopted under it. So staff is still following your direction, and that direction can change in the future.
Thank you.
So the circumstance, though, would be the expectation, the business owner complies with all the rules we put in place. Each year comes back for renewal, town manager approves it. They haven't failed in any of the criteria, so it seems like it would not be fair if we then said, yeah, but we are going to change the rules on you now. And now what I do understand is we have the authority to no longer allow the necessary permit to continue. And so it's not about, we have these 5 things you had to do and you did them all, but we're still going to deny you. It's, we've now denied everybody because we tried this and we've decided that we're no longer going to allow this business activity. And so it's across the board, completely objective, not discriminatory about that one particular applicant that has complied with all the rules. Is that correct with our authority?
Yes, because the annual permit's required and it doesn't have to exist.
Right. So I thought I remembered that correctly. We've had that conversation at least a couple of times, that is the kind of escape valve that if this doesn't fit in town, things aren't right, even though we thought we did everything that was appropriate and controlled just the right amount, there's still that this isn't right escape possibility from allowing that activity. I know the vice mayor made a point of it multiple times about the perpetuity of a license, and I think that has been addressed because of this very language. So I will try to not repeat a lot of what has already been said. I know that the discussion about a secondary retail diversity was a concept that I think is well intended because we want diversity as much as we can get it. It doesn't necessarily need to be within the four walls of a business. We do not have an excess of cannabis business activity in town. Therefore, I think by definition, there isn't the need for diversity within that business. Whatever type of business might come forward if this is approved will be a unique, one-of-a-kind business for Yountville. And I believe the language already limits to one. I think that's been made clear that up to one only, if I remember, is what we've talked about with the permit. I agree about the overlay. I think that should be in the measure for the vote on the ballot because I think it makes a difference in someone's decision about they might approve something if it's in certain areas of town and not approve it in other areas of town. I do think, and we have put significant time, energy, public discourse, and very much drilling down on where we believe this general type of activity could be appropriate. We've been pretty restrictive, I think, with the considered areas. So I think that is important to be, while we want to stay very open-minded to the type of business model, I think we do need to be a little more restrictive about the location and ensure folks that might be nervous that it could be close to a residential neighborhood, that we are making a definitive statement that it is only going to be allowed in very certain specific areas that we have fully vetted. The vice mayor mentioned something about on-site consumption. I think that needs to be kept in there. I think the definition of consumption is a little bit looser than some people might think, whether it's topical creams, other types of things, in addition to something that might be taken orally or otherwise consumed. I think there are a variety of types of consumption, and then lawyers would get to fight about, sorry, Gary, get to fight about the definition of consumption. Can it be through the skin? Can it be, all that? I just think that the option should remain. We've, again, had a pretty thorough, robust discussion about that. If it's not clear, I'm totally fine making it clear that one permit maximum under this ordinance. Just trying to look through some of my other notes here. I do think that we have a history with the community center having two ballot measures, if one, then the other, with the funding mechanism as opposed to having them combined. I don't know that first of all, I don't feel strongly either way. I am concerned that with 75-word maximum, there could be a limit to the clarity of the measure. I want it to be as precise and accurate as possible. What I would almost suggest, since this isn't a final action with this language, that we see if our town attorney and staff can draft a sample 75-word combined question and see if it's reasonable and accurate, and it might answer this for us, that if there's no way to combine the required language from the tax question into the main ordinance, then I think by default they should be kept separate. So I would be interested in holding off the final direction on that piece until we know if for sure we can't combine them. Because for me, I think the concern is more about the clarity and accuracy of the ballot questions, not whether they fit better as one for a voter to only have to read one measure versus two. I think it's reasonable, and especially after we saw with the community center vote. I remember that the poll, or not the poll numbers, the results were pretty close, one and the other. So it seemed like those that were supporting the community center also supported the funding mechanism. I would expect it would be probably similar in this case, but I am not a pollster, so that's just my anecdotal opinion. I'm not ranking. I'm looking at, again, my notes from the Vice Mayor's comments, ranking flexibility for the council. I think I've shared that with my questions about, I'm concerned if we don't follow the ranking criteria that we will be very careful about, that we are setting ourselves up for a legal challenge. And I think that we just need to put all the effort into creating the best application process that we can, and it be more defensible and objective that way. So just quickly to summarize, I'm fine if we take out the secondary retail component. If we don't want the language about substantial community benefit, I understand revenue is a significant community benefit in and of itself. Even though that's not the main driver, we're also not looking to have a business that's going to fail and lose money either. It's not our main motivator, but it's certainly one of the elements. So I don't know, Gary, Sandra, Steve, if you feel like you've had enough guidance. I know that, as we've said, we're not taking formal action on the final language, or even if we're combining or having two separate measures. But if you've had enough direction to move forward, and that the public has been able to, again, hear our dialogue on this, that we have enough that we can come back at a future meeting for what could be the final action?
Well, I'm going to say two things. I think you've offered one. I think we can work on drafting. You've certainly given us some cleanup language to go into the stuff that's been drafted. We will take with great gusto the assignment to see if we can develop language and wording consistent with the 75, because I do think, I don't disagree with Councilmember Dornbecker's point of view. And if we can, it simplifies it for everything by only having one. So we'll see where we go, and if we can't get there, but we'll have some options for you. The other thing I hear, though, is that you also want us to bring the overlay discussion. So next council meeting, we will need to have you provide the guidance on the overlay so that we can create the map that would then go in to the, if I'm hearing you correct, which I think I am, so that would be a task that we would need to do next council meeting as well. And then that probably means that we're bringing the final package back on June 2nd.
Okay, thank you. And we still have all of the month of June, right? In case there are any things that we still want to deliberate on after June 2?
Right. But I mean, it gets us very tighter. It's tighter, but you're correct. It gives us, we still meet our timeline, but that means we'll have cleanup language on the 19th. We'll have, and I do agree, you've had a lot of discussion already on the overlays, and probably that can be, a half hour to an hour conversation. And if you're focused on that, and we'll have a cleanup draft of this for you all to look at. But I mean, I'm just being honest about what I think the conversation would look like. But I do think, this is the number one issue. The council's committed to having it on the ballot. We certainly can get you there.
Gary, how do you feel? You need any further guidance on content?
No, I've taken notes on what each of you have said, and I'll go through on consensus items, and we'll propose additional language, and we'll be ready for that discussion at the next meeting.
Great. Vice Mayor, your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you. I had a follow-up question, Mayor, to the on-site consumption. Under the application, the disqualification list, it says an application shall be automatically disqualified if, and one of the items is the application does not permit on-site consumption of cannabis in compliance with Business and Professions Code, blah, blah, blah. So I'm wondering, does that stay in? Does that come out while we're looking at what we would be looking at for an application? And maybe the town attorney, Mr. Bell, maybe this is actually for you, because I don't know what Business and Professions Code section that is.
So with my comments, what my expectation is that it's consideration. It doesn't necessarily need to be mandatory because, again, we're not deciding the specific type of retail business. If there is a retail business that literally, figuratively, physically not consumable in a traditional sense, I think we want to be able to consider that. So, Gary, if you think that we can just kind of soften that language from must or mandatory to may, so that it's not prohibited, because I want the creative opportunity to consider that potential.
Yeah, so I will take another read at it to make it clear that the application can propose some combination of those three, but that the council still wants to be able to make the final decision as part of the use permit process, if I'm understanding that correctly.
I think that would make sense. That would satisfy my interest. And I'm seeing nods from all, if Jeff would nod one way or another, I'd see all. Okay, or shrug. All right. Let's at least look at that language and we'll continue the conversation. Again, we're publicizing some of the key points that we want still to get clarified, and the public will be able to comment on all of this as well. So it sounds like we're going to put this back on May 19th, as long as staff is able to do it and we don't have any new pandemic crises between now and 2 weeks from now. And then again, that won't be final decision. Continue the process into at least June 2. And now Marita's totally distracted. Councilmember Dornbecker has been distracted by a cute child. Okay, I think we decided that is enough direction for today. Thank you very much. Going to go ahead and move on to our next agenda item. Believe it or not, we do still have plenty of business left. Next up is item 10D, which is the Hopper Creek pedestrian path. Agenda item 20-2548. Consider adoption of resolution number 20-3985, authorizing the town manager on behalf of the town to sign the necessary documents to purchase real property located at 6470 Washington Street, APN 036-090-021, and for a temporary construction easement for the Hopper Creek pedestrian path PK-0003 segment from Oak Circle to Mission Street. And before we proceed, I believe, Vice Mayor, you have a statement?
Yes, thank you. And I'm just going to read this. I have been advised by the town attorney of a potentially disqualifying conflict of interest as to this agenda item due to the location of my home and therefore a possible effect on my financial interest in my home. I will be recusing myself from this item by disabling my video and microphone so that I cannot participate in the discussion of and possible vote on the item. And I will do that now.
So you can't leave the chambers. Maybe you have to go sit in another room. Okay. And replaced by Mr. Ferens. Okay, so we have the Vice Mayor leave and John shows up. Okay. Let's see. With that, I think we are ready to go ahead with the staff report. John.
Thank you. Greetings, Mayor and members of the council. I am John Ferns, your Deputy Public Works Director. And before you this evening is consideration of an action authorizing the town manager to execute the necessary documents to acquire a piece of real property and a temporary construction easement at 6470 Washington Street, where the West America Bank is, and we'll also refer to it as the Maxwell property. They're the owners of the parcel. So we use West America Bank parcel and Maxwell property interchangeably as we go through this. As a part of the town's general plan, the town has been working on a long-term goal of constructing a continuous path along Hopper Creek. A number of segments have been built to date, but the segment from Oak Circle to Mission Street still remains to be constructed. This piece of the path is currently a project in the town's capital improvement program. As it's proposed, the project will construct the path from Oak Circle Park, a bridge across Hopper Creek to the west side of Hopper Creek, landing at the rear of the ad hoc parcel, and then run along the rear of the ad hoc parcel, transition to the West America parcel, and then connect to the crosswalk at Mission Street. The capital improvement project was conceived in 2 phases. The first phase being the environmental review, design, and right-of-way phase, and then the second phase being the construction phase. The environmental design review and right-of-way phase is funded by local funds, whereas the construction phase will be funded by a grant from the state of California's transportation grant money program. So to date, we have completed the environmental work and the design portion of the first phase of the project, and we're working on completing the right-of-way phase, which brings us to tonight's action. The project alignment is located on both public and private lands, and as such requires property rights from ultimately 3 private properties along the path: the ad hoc parcel, the Rancho de Napa parcel, which is Mission Street, and the West America Bank parcel. The town has previously acquired 2 of the 3 easements that we need, one from ad hoc and one from Rancho de Napa, and we're seeking to acquire the property rights needed for the West America Bank piece, which again is also known as the Maxwell parcel. So to that end, we hired a right-of-way agent to act as our consultant. Interwest is the company's name, to act as our right-of-way consultant, because a town has to follow a certain series of steps in order to acquire private land for a public works project. So Interwest was our specialist that helped us move along that process. Negotiations have ensued, and we've arrived at an agreement with the property owner. It's important to note that originally the town sought to acquire an easement on the Maxwell parcel to place the trail there for the trail use. The negotiations have caused us to change that to become an acquisition of the land in fee title for the piece that we need to construct the path there. The property owner was unwilling to negotiate for an easement, but was willing to negotiate for the fee title portion of it. Fee title means we'll own it, we'll purchase the land. In addition to the land that we need for the path, we also need to acquire a temporary construction easement, which will create a space for the contractor to physically construct the project. And then finally, we're responsible for purchasing whatever improvements that land within that piece. And in this case, there's a little bit of landscaping, a small fence, and some curb and asphalt that doesn't amount to very much value. So through that whole process, we've arrived at a fair market value price for the purchase of the land at $284,040. Currently, the CIP budget for this project has adequate funds to accommodate this purchase. At present, the fiscal year 1920 budget has a local fund balance of plus or minus $400,000. And it's important to remind people that this coming fiscal year 2021, the budget will receive an infusion of grant money from the state for the construction. That is set to be authorized by the California Transportation Commission at their May 13th and 14th meeting, regularly scheduled meeting coming up next week. So that kind of lays out the project. The alternative to this, or the downside to this, if we were not able to acquire the property, is we've spent plus or minus $140,000 getting us this far. And if we were to not acquire the property, we would have to forfeit that effort, as well as forfeit the $500,000 monies that are coming from the grant and from the state in form of grant. So tonight's action has already been addressed by the project CEQA, and it meets the town's strategic plan goals. So that's the action presented before you. Alternatively, council could approve the action. Alternatively, you could reject the proposal and provide direction to staff, or ultimately stop the project. Whereas stated previously, we would forfeit the prior effort and have to relinquish the state grant for the construction of the path. The path would then not get constructed, and it would still be a goal in the general plan. So with that, I'm available for questions.
John, thank you very much. Questions of the staff report? I'm not seeing any blue hands. Okay. Now there was very near the end of your presentation, John, you froze and we lost your audio. Just to make sure that we heard, I think it was when you were referencing the 2021 funding, was it? Does that make sense?
Yes, I can repeat. So in the fiscal year 2021, the project will receive an infusion of up to $500,000 in grant monies from the state, from their state transportation improvement program.
Yeah, that was kind of important that we made sure to hear that.
Yes.
Also, Mayor and Council, I also want to be clear that while we had hoped to acquire an easement, acquiring the easement still would have had a financial consideration. It just, I mean, and it would have been probably in the low six figures, so which is why our budget had that. And as you may recall, we obtained the ad hoc easement through a conditional use permit almost 10 years ago when they added addendums. So we've been proactively working incrementally at this path segment develop part. But I do want to just emphasize, and I think Director Tagliabashi said it really well, we have sunken costs, and all of the permits and all of that work has a finite timeline. If we don't pull and move forward with the project, those permits become null and void, and we have to start over from scratch. And also, we would, you know, this is not a per capita grant. This was actually a competitive grant that the town won. So we just lose the funding. The project will cost more at a later point in time, and it's still on our list. And I also just want to make sure everybody realizes this has been funded by our allocations out of our capital projects fund, and it's in this fiscal year. As Deputy Director Farron's indicated, we're still going to finish this year and give back to the capital projects fund a little bit, because even with this purchase, we're not going to extend the full amount of the anticipated budget. And then we will, you know, basically, we'll be getting our CTC approval perhaps within 2 weeks. And then this anticipated to go out to bid, be under construction this summer and early fall.
Thank you. John, I wanted to ask if you could just give a general site description. How beneficial is this going to be, and where, in terms of pedestrian walkability, it's going to connect which specific neighborhoods that are currently not connected?
So this will connect at Oak Circle Park. So it'll connect the path from Oak Circle Street north, its full extent, to where I believe it stops at Yount. And then going south, it will connect. We've got the easement for the crosswalk at Mission Street, so it will connect to the south portion that goes south of Mission Street.
So it's one of the last segments of our entire circulation of pedestrian path that is unfinished.
Yeah, absolutely, Mayor. And what's really, I think, critical is this is right at the entry gateway, if you will, to Rancho de Napa, and it will allow those residents to go north into the Oak Circle neighborhood. Many of them walk dogs and then also go on to Vineyard Park for exercise. So it provides a safe alternative connection, and it will provide a thorough connection all the way from Champagne Drive, actually further south, but there's no really buddy there, but Champagne Drive all the way to Yount Street, where Councilmember Durham can welcome them all as it abuts out onto his property.
Yeah, so this is about as private residential pathway as we're going to probably see. This is allowing people to come out of Rancho de Napa, well, actually both parks probably, and not have to go all the way out to Washington Street, but have that proximity.
Very much so.
Yeah.
This is one of our resident serving pathways. It's been in our general plan for a number of years and our multimodal plans. This is not, by no stretch of the way, this is not a tourist serving path. This is a resident interfacing path.
And one last question, John. Do we have any issues, whether improvements or challenges with creek and flood potential, anything like that? Is this going to have an impact one way or the other?
No, it's been designed to accommodate the anticipated flows in Hopper Creek, and we've already acquired our permit from the Department of Fish and Wildlife, California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Great, thank you. Seeing no other blue hands, Michelle, did we receive any public comments on this item?
Thank you, Mayor. No, we did not.
All right, thank you. Is there any further discussion by the council? Councilmember Dornbecker.
Yes, I just want to confirm that the grant that we will be receiving in 2021 is designed to accommodate the cost of this. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, because otherwise I don't know that I could support it in a time when our whole economy is struggling. But I'm really glad that that grant, and we're sure that we're going to get that grant.
Yes, well, I can't say 100% for sure because the CTC hearing hasn't occurred yet, but I believe it will be approved, yes, at the CTC hearing.
What I will also say, Councilmember Dornbecker, to address your point, we don't have any money budgeted outside of the grant to pay for the construction. So the only way we would proceed with the actual award of the construction bid is upon formal approval of the grant. So your concern will be addressed.
Thank you.
And the fact that that money couldn't be used for anything other than capital project anyway, so it's not like we're not funding something else that might need the money.
Right. Actually, Mayor, that's very correct. This was a competitive grant, and in fact, we can't go switch it to anything else. It has to go for this specific purpose that was what we put in, and it's as you can imagine, it was treated as the missing link. And I will also point out that staff has been working on grants and various planning process for this for over 10 years. So, it's there, it's ready. It's unfortunate timing, but I do think, we're not taking money away from something that could be diverted to another cause.
Thank you. So if there's no further discussion, is there action to be had? Does somebody want to make a motion on this?
I'll make a motion. I get my computer back up here.
Councilmember Moeller is speaking, just for the record.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we approve, Resolution 20-3985. Do I have that right? Yes. Authorizing the town manager on behalf of the town to sign the necessary documents to purchase real property located at 6470 Washington Street, assessor parcel number 036-090-021, and for the temporary construction easement for the Hopper Creek pedestrian path PK-0003 segment from Oak Circle to Mission Street.
I second.
Thank you. So a motion by Councilmember Moeller, second by Councilmember Durham. Michelle, roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Councilmember Moeller.
Yes.
Councilmember Durham.
Yes.
Councilmember Dornbecker.
Yes.
Mayor Dunbar.
Yes.
Thank you.
And again, just for the record, Vice Mayor recused herself from this item. And we would invite her back somehow if we could identify that it's time for her to return. Again, I'm just trying to fill time. So she'll be back shortly. The next item, it'll take me a second to read through it. So in the meantime, we hope to get the Vice Mayor reconnected. Next item is
I'm
item
back.
10.
I got the high sign from the other room. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 10E, that's agenda 20-2485, Yountville Elementary School Art Sculpture. Consider adoption of resolution number 20-3986, approving the design and acquisition of the permanent Yountville art walk sculpture in recognition of Yountville Elementary School, approving the location of the sculpture and allocating $10,000 in financing and funding. With that, I invite Samantha Holland to give us a report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So before you tonight is a design concept for the sculpture to commemorate the Yountville Elementary School, as well as a site recommendation and a request for potential funding. And so if you recall, the ad hoc committee was created in January of this year, and council members Dorenbecker and Durham were appointed to the committee, as well as Yountville Arts representatives Rhonda Scher and Kimberly Cook, who's joining us tonight, as well as school appointees that included the principal, Terry Bianchi, teacher Debbie Simpkins, and past parent and community member and town staffer Jennifer Carvalho were also on that committee. So after several renditions and meetings took place, a concept came forward for a book sculpture that really simplified a lot of the different concepts that were being looked at previously. The book was thought to represent, obviously, the school and academics, while still with the current concept being brought forward, captured the handprints that are so important to the memory of the school and in the minds of the past and obviously current students who have attended there. As you all know, I'm sure, but for people at home, if you haven't walked the campus, handprints adorn the walls of the exterior of the school, and they're made up of all of the graduating classes dating back a long time. We've heard from many community members, alumni, current students, and staff how important and significant those handprints are. So the sculpture concept coming forward is something that one of the artists that is well known to us, Richard Starks, was already working on and brought forward. As you know, having some of you gone through the process for commissioning art with the Veterans Memorial Park project, commissioning a new piece of art that's not been made before can be very expensive and very timely, taking a long time to craft. So looking for something that was either already in thought or process with an artist was for us of significance because it can be less costly, as well as something that we could receive timely to make the project happen before the school really disbands. So for the sculpture itself, I can bring up the photo. I know it shrinks your screen, but I can bring it up to discuss if you would like, but it's compiled of, like I said, a book sculpture made out of Corten steel. The proposal is for the cover of the book, which is really would be the back of the sculpture, to be treated with muriatic acid and develop a rust-colored patina, but then also have a lettering on the spine of the book, Yountville Elementary School. The front, which would be representative as the book is open, of pages would be powder coated in a linen type color, and then primary colored handprints of the current students and staff would be invited to be placed on there with specific paint, and then the full finish of the front. We're also proposing lettering at the top of the front pages. So along with the sculpture, as we discussed before, would be a small interpretive panel similar to the one by the underpass mural. We also have something of a larger series with where the grandfather oak was. But that panel would describe more of the history of the school, the significance of the sculpture and the handprints, and tie in, like I said, the history of the school, as well as the potential site, which is also something up for discussion. The potential site being in front of the town hall, which, as you know, was historically one of the original schools. So that interpretive panel would really tie it all together for people. So the cost of the project is estimated to be just under $19,000, which includes the sculpture, powder coating, supplies, materials for putting the handprints on, and then some stipend for an artist to assist us with the handprints, and then also acquiring and getting printed the interpretive panel. So the Yountville Elementary School PTA, as we've discussed, has committed $5,000 to the project. The Yountville Kiwanis Club raised $3,250 for the project during the crab feed. And then Yountville Arts approved $1,500 in funding from their Town of Yountville Community Foundation Art Fund. So the original intent, as we discussed in the past, was really to fundraise for the majority of the remaining balance, obviously, and as well as the council being very supportive originally of helping to fund the project. We are aware and as concerned that we may not be successful as we once thought we were with fundraising, and that also the challenges the town might have putting forward a budget for this based on the very abrupt changes we've all experienced these past 2 months. That being said, and I have had questions from several council members since the staff report came out, and I have reached back out to the PTA board to see if they are able to allocate more funding. So a little background on that is obviously the school had a lot of plans for that funding as the school wrapped up its final year, and with school being taken out of the physical location and at home, a lot of that spending is not going to occur. So they were fairly confident they may be able to contribute an additional $3,000. The leftover money from the PTA budget in Yountville that PTA will dissolve when the school closes, and that money will transfer to the Willow Elementary School Parent-Teacher Association. So they were fairly confident that they could approve an additional $3,000, but that has not been formally approved by their board yet. Something else that came up I wanted to bring forward that I hadn't put in the staff report is that so we're asking for the not to exceed budget of $10,000 from the general fund 1015 community promotions and projects budget, community promotions and programs budget. And if you may recall, we did budget in this fiscal year $10,000 for the swim pass reimbursement program, which at this point we have currently received no applications for, and I don't anticipate receiving any applications for that. So that funding is in that account and has not been spent. So I just wanted to bring that forward for your consideration as well. So really what we're asking tonight is 3 parts. It's to discuss and provide feedback and potential action on commissioning the project and accepting it as a permanent sculpture on the Art Walk, as well as approving the sculpture location or identifying another site, and then also approving not to exceed funding of $10,000 towards the project. And as I outlined in the staff report and I discussed in a previous meeting, the not to exceed amount would assist us in moving forward more quickly. We could go ahead and acquire the piece with the goal to do a quick fundraising effort from the community, as well as that have that pending funding from the PTA that's potentially going to be coming as well. So there's a pretty good chance that we will not be expending or needing that full amount. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Kimberly Cook is also here from the Yountville Arts Commission to answer any questions that you might have.
Yes, thank you. First, welcome, Kimberly Cook.
Thank you.
I wanted to invite you to add any additional comments to Samantha's report before we ask for questions, if you have any.
I do, just a few. The staff report was very clear, so I will be brief. From the beginning of this project, when Tara and Debbie reached out to the Arts Commission, the objective has been very clear. It's to memorialize the history of the school and preserve the tradition of the end of the year students' handprints. So the Arts Commission and the ad hoc committee went through several revisions, but we are very pleased to present this final sculpture design to you tonight for your approval. We're very proud of what we've put together in such a short time with the help of our trusted Art Walk sculptor, Richard Starks. The beautiful sculpture of an open book, if approved, can grace the planting area near the school in the front of Town Hall, along with an interpretive plaque that captures the history of the school in Yountville. We sincerely hope that this design meets with your approval so that this difficult school year can be celebrated with a positive memory. So if anybody has any questions.
Thank you. I did also want to invite Councilmember Durham or Councilmember Dornbecker, who are also representing the council on the ad hoc committee, if there was any additional comment before the rest of us have questions. Councilmember Durham? No, you're good? Okay, Councilmember Dornbecker?
Thank you. First of all, I want to apologize to Kim and other members of the committee, the ad hoc committee. I have been very ill, so I was unable to attend several of the meetings. But I was in the beginning of the process, and it was a wonderful and worthwhile project from the very beginning. And I think that the idea of the open book with the handprints were always a major consideration. So I'm thrilled. I think it's a beautiful sculpture, and it really represents the school. And it's really odd in this strange year. You know, we lost the school, we've lost the rest of this year somehow. And so I think it's a lovely, happy tribute. So I want to thank you, Kim and Rhonda, Cher, and the other members of the committee, and my colleague, Jeff Durham, for picking up the slack when I couldn't. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. I'm glad you're feeling better.
Thanks.
Thanks. Council members, any questions about this? Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I love this concept. So thank you to the ad hoc and to our staff. And I know there's been so much work going on so quickly. So thank you. And a couple of questions, and by these you'll know I'm not an artist, so they're just questions. Which way are the handprints going to face? Will the book open out toward the street or in toward the town hall?
Out towards the street.
Okay.
We have flexibility to position it any way we want, but to us it made the most sense to put it that way.
And so then on the spine of it, I'm really excited about the rusted look. I think that's really cool. But it says, I think, Yountville Elementary School down the spine. Is it possible to have that maybe not rusted so that people know immediately, get that telegraph of it's the school?
They probably won't see the spine.
Okay.
Because they would have to walk on the pad and around, but we wanted it to be there just because a book would have a name. We do intend to put some sort of title at the top of the left-hand page, you know, the history of the School of Yountville or something like that. The children of the last year of the School of Yountville. We haven't come up with the wording, but we do want to put that on the face of the page of the book.
Thank you. Very exciting.
Good.
So I will reference, there is, in the example you presented, it has language, the upper left page, Yountville Elementary School, and the upper right page, 1858 to 2020. So you're saying that's not the plan, or that is the plan? Above the handprints?
We have not had a discussion with the principal or anybody on the ad hoc committee to the exact wording yet.
Okay. Is there a concern? I have a little bit of a concern about the fact that it's in the landscape area, and looks like there's even some kind of drain or something that's right smack in front of that pad. You can't tell if it's electrical or what, but people are guaranteed to walk into the landscape area if this is the location. So
yes.
Has there been thought about what to do about that, especially with the interpretive panel? This iteration is facing sideways right over the top of a lavender plant. So is this supposed to be final placement and approval, or that's still to be determined by somebody?
Well, I think that the placement on that pad is what we're asking for approval for, the landscaping around it, and then we discussed moving, that's in that either moving or relocating that drop down, and then also adding some stepping stones. So, you know, internally we can make some fairly easy, you know, changes to make it accessible for someone to walk up to it there. I mean, potentially I discussed with Larry, our public works manager, even extending the pad out to the sidewalk, but that obviously would be a little more costly. But internally we can do some work around that.
Yeah, you know that kids are going to want to put their hands into those handprints. So
Yeah.
we just
Yeah.
want to make sure that it's safe.
Yes.
Two questions. One is there lighting proposed for this to light it at night or no lighting?
Hadn't thought about that. I haven't even looked to see if there's a street light nearby.
Right now, I would have to say we don't have electrical to that area. We'd have to see if we can pull down. So I don't anticipate, like most of our sculptures, it's not intended to be lit. We do have the flagpole is lit, which is just slightly to the south, but I don't think it was our intention to light this now.
And I'm sure there will be lighting from street lights.
Yes.
But not targeted spotlights. It sounds like, and it makes sense. It has a very different feel. Plus, it becomes a very different cost if we have to start running electrical where there isn't any.
A very different cost.
Yes.
Exactly. I mean, we may be able to look at some of the better quality solar just to see what it would look like. But I also agree with what Commissioner Cook and Director Holland were saying. With our public works crew, we can fine tune the placement, make it safe, secure, adjust landscaping, make it look, more finished. The other thing I just want to clarify also is that the interpretive panel is going to have a history of Yountville Elementary School, which is actually plural, which includes the town hall site because that's an original Yountville Elementary School. So just one of those interesting things about that is it's going to be a bit broader than just focusing on the current configuration of Yountville Elementary and kind of bring a little bit of a connection to the site.
Right. Last question. Anybody ask Napa Unified School District to kick in some money for this?
I'm not above sending a letter on behalf and doing that. I'm certainly willing to do that.
Yeah, I'm serious about that.
I sense that. No, I think I'd be more than happy to do that.
Let's do that. Let's see if I won't say what I want to say. Anyway.
I'll let them know that we're funding it, and it'd be nice if they matched our funding. How's that? We'll start there.
That sounds good. That sounds much more political.
I have a little bit of a.
Okay. There we go. Thank you for returning the screen. Michelle, did we receive any public comment on this item?
We did not, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I do want to just say, since I only asked questions, I'm very happy with how this concept came together. I think it's a very appropriate concept. It's definitely going to change the presence of the front of Town Hall and the landscaping there, but I think probably in a good way. It looks like it's going to be very dynamic. It may soften over time, which might also be a good thing. It's going to be with that colorizing and that presence, it could be very prominent, but that's okay, I think, because it makes sense to be on this site. I was nervous when I heard there had been a site picked and without us knowing what the disposition of the current school campus property is, how it might relate to what could happen over there. I think this is pretty safe from any impact that might happen on that parcel. So congratulations, Kimberly and Samantha and Jeff and Marita and everyone else. That I know we had some school folks and some parents did a very good job of representing the history of the school.
Thank you.
John, that means a lot.
It does.
Any other comments from council? Councilmember Dornbecker, is your hand back up?
Yes, please. I'd like to make a, I would like to make a
motion.
A motion, thank you. Approving resolution number 20-3986, approving the design and acquisition of the permanent Yountville Art Walk sculpture in recognition of Yountville Elementary School, approving the location of the sculpture and allocating not to exceed funding of $10,000.
Thank you. Is there a second to that?
A second.
I'll second.
Second. Oh, sorry.
I heard a second from Councilmember Durham, so we have a motion by Councilmember Dornbecker, second Councilmember Durham. Michelle, roll call, please, or roll call vote.
Thank you. Councilmember Dornbecker,
Yes.
Councilmember Durham,
Yes.
Councilmember Moeller,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Dorman,
Yes.
Mayor Dunbar.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Very much.
Thank you so much for your help and support.
And can we have that done by June 5th?
We're working really hard.
Just
Probably.
kidding.
No, probably.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay, then.
We're trying.
Aspirational goal. There you
Yeah.
go. All right. Thank you. Moving on. Thank you, Kimberly, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Item 10F, Napa County Groundwater Committee, Yountville Staff Representative. Consideration of appointment of a Yountville representative to the Napa County Groundwater Sustainability Plan Advisory Committee. Who is doing this? I see Steve's name on the staff report. And you're muted, Steve.
Sorry, I was doing so well on that. And then there, very briefly.
John, you don't need to tell him that.
Anyway, go ahead, Steve.
I'll pause there. Yes, thank you. Very briefly, this item here is a request from the county that the town of Yountville appoint a representative to the county groundwater committee, which is approximately 25 different stakeholders. There has been a seat that's identified specifically for the town as an urban community. As you also know, we are a water utility operation. So this body will start meeting fairly quickly. So the request is, it doesn't necessarily need to be a council person. It can be a council person. So given the technical nature of some of this, I was proposed to recommend that it be either the Public Works Director or a Deputy Public Works Director, but I want to also be clear that if one of the council members wanted to take this post, it's certainly your prerogative to. But that it will have it will be a fair number of meetings and data dump and analysis, if I can be direct.
Okay, thank you. And I see that we do have our Public Works Director, Joe Tagliabashi, here, whether he wants to either volunteer or volunteer the Deputy Director who may not still be on the line.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Mayor Dunbar, members of the council. I think that between John, the Deputy Director, and myself, we can figure out the best person to represent the town and make sure that we are getting what we need out of that group of people.
If I could, it might be appropriate that we have the council designate the Public Works Director and as primary and the Deputy Director as alternate. That way we're covered.
So moved. I agree.
Yes, you beat me to it, Steve. I was about to make that recommendation. So Councilmember Moeller has made the motion to appoint Public Works Director Tagliabashi as the primary and Deputy Director Fearens as the secondary on this committee. Councilmember Durham has seconded.
And I have another comment.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion. Go ahead.
Okay, Joe, I think you're probably pretty familiar. Now I won't have to give it under council comments. LAFCO is going to, we had a meeting yesterday. So we're going to be releasing our first draft of our MSR on the countywide water and wastewater. And even though we were fought by some county members, we did include groundwater in there as well. So I think that's going to be a very helpful, comprehensive document. It'd be great once you get on this committee to get some of the stakeholders to give us some input on that as well. So, because I think there's quite a few pieces kind of going on with this whole subject matter throughout the county and different organizations right now. So I think you'll be a great pick.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your support. And we're still working with the rest of the county members on the drought contingency plan that we started about this time last year. So I think it's a good synergistic move for all of us to be talking about all those things as the resources become more scarce and more valuable, and we need to protect them and make sure that they are available for those who need them when they need them.
Thank you. Before I ask for a roll call vote, Michelle, do we have any public comment on this item?
Thank you, Mayor. No, we did not have any public comment.
So then we'll go ahead. We have a motion and a second. Go ahead and please with the roll call vote.
Councilmember Moeller,
Yes.
Councilmember Durham,
Yes.
Councilmember Dornbecker,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Dorman,
Yes.
and Mayor Dunbar.
Yes,
Thank you.
that passes unanimously. Thank you all very much. And thank you, Joe and John, if he's still listening. That's what happens when you leave the Zoom call, is you get appointed to a committee. Next up, item 10G, and that's agenda number 20-2554, a settlement agreement, a consideration of adoption of resolution number 20-3987, approving a settlement agreement and parking lease with Restoration Hardware. Is this you, Steve, or is it Gary? Gary unmuted, so I'm going with him first.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to give the presentation. I think we're waiting for.
I was going to say we do.
Dave Stan.
We're having a technical issue getting Dave Stanchak on.
Okay.
So we may need to resend the link.
We're working on it.
Yeah, he got into the waiting room early, and we explained to him he didn't need to be there for 3 hours.
I have sent it to him now again. So
Perfect. Thank you. I see Luke and their counsel, Zane Gresham, are joining, so that looks good.
I just sent him the link again. So hopefully.
We have Mr. Gresham has successfully joined us. Welcome. And there's Mr. Magnini. Welcome as well.
Hi, everyone.
And we're just still waiting for Dave, if we can get him on board, unless one of you wanted to represent, as we're starting off with a staff report from Gary Bell. If we can go ahead and start that, unless Gary, you wanted to wait until we get David back online.
Yeah, Zane, you're actually muted, Zane, but if you want to unmute yourself, then we can hear you. Or Sam, could you do that for him?
Yeah, sorry.
Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm Zane Gresham, counsel for RH, and we're pleased to be before you. Please go ahead with the staff report. I'm sure that Dave Stanchak is trying to get in. I see he pinged me again saying he's still trying to get in. Technical difficulties, I guess. But please go ahead.
All right, thank you. It's understandable. I was watching the Napa County Board of Supervisors meeting this morning, and they had to recess twice when they had technical difficulties that eliminated several of the supervisors that were calling in remotely. So we deal with these things in our virtual meeting world. So again, feels like I've been doing this quite a bit tonight. I'm filling the void of time here, hoping that Dave gets logged in. Let's go ahead, Gary, and get started. You'll probably tell us things that Mr. Stanchak already knows. So go ahead.
Absolutely. All right. Mayor and Council, before you this evening, there are 2 agreements and a resolution approving those agreements. I'll give some background and then some substantive points in both of the agreements, and then I'll be available to answer any questions, as will representatives from RH, including their counsel, Zane Gresham. This is the result of negotiations and several months of discussions with RH and their counsel, and it resulted in 2 agreements that are before you this evening. The first is a settlement agreement and release. This is the main settlement of the notice of violation, abatement order, and administrative penalties that were issued to RH on January 13th. This addressed the notice of violation alleged issues with staffing and insufficient employee parking offsite and onsite. The settlement agreement resolves the penalties for $75,000 in 4 equal payments of $18,750. requires compliance with an employee parking management plan that's been drafted by staff and agreed to by RH, and requires an amendment to the use permit that relates to the parking lease, which I'll discuss in a moment, but increases the outside seating by 8 immediately and 8 upon construction of the parking spaces. So I'll talk about the parking lease now briefly. This is to 23 spaces will be for employee parking of RH, and 21 will be for parking at the public, for the public on Washington Street between the intersections of Washington and Lincoln and Washington and Jackson. It requires annual lease payments of over $66,000 that are adjusted by CPI, and also a prorated payment by January 1 for the first 6 months. RH will be using it on an interim basis immediately to solve the parking problem, and that's part of the settlement agreement to immediately resolve the code violations. The parking lease will be effective upon the issuance of the administrative use permit. That's a process that will happen after this. But its effective date will be told if and for the duration of any appeal or court action related to that. So that is a very rough outline of what these two agreements entail, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the council might have or to go into more detail on any of the things I just discussed.
Thank you, Gary. I'm looking for blue hands from council members. Any specific questions about Gary's presentation? Seeing no hands, I want to invite Mr. Gresham, if you would like to share any thoughts while we wait for your colleague to join us.
On behalf of RH, I wanted to thank the council and the staff for their constructive engagement and helping to bring to a close the notices of violation that were issued, and to lay a good path for the way forward. RH really regrets the circumstances that led to the issuance of the NOV, and indeed with this new approach represented by the agreements that your town attorney has summarized for you, hopes that this will lead to a better communication and more effective compliance on behalf of RH. And with that, would appreciate the approval of this settlement. Thank you.
Thank you. Luke, I wanted to offer, in case you wanted to add anything, since you've taken the time to join us.
Yeah, just to reiterate Zane's comments, we're very appreciative of the time that's been put into this. We are happy to look forward to finding a resolution where everyone involved is not just satisfied but happy with the outcome. So thank you.
If I could right now, Michelle's working with Mr. Stanchak to see if we can get him to at least call in so he can participate, as I know he does have a few comments he wants to share with the council.
So you're asking me to ad lib a little bit longer, one more time? I'm running out of material.
Yes, I am asking you.
Well, I'll take this chance right now then to thank Jason, our tech in the back room that keeps coming out here every 10 minutes to reactivate the lights here in the council chambers. So when you see it get a little darker, it's because the lights have gone off. That's a side effect of having a completely empty chambers other than me.
Mayor, I have a public comment if you would like that to be a time filler.
Yes, please.
This first public comment through our public comment at yville.com is from Pam Reeves, and she is writing to oppose your resolution for a settlement agreement with RH. This is the culmination of a flawed process of their development plan. The town has been backed into a corner by allowing a development that did not fit on the property and required all kinds of special plans and workarounds. The ultimate and predictable result of that is that the applicant cannot operate under the arrangements and has violated his terms and conditions of use. Now the town is providing an escape route for the applicant that utilizes land on a lease basis that should not be designated for a single business. It also adversely affects property around community parkland. This is not the type of solution that provides a win for the residents. It only provides a win for the one business. This is a slap in the face to other businesses in town that are forced to actually follow their own property restrictions and parameters, and goes a step further in selling off the town to the highest bidder. I, for one, am disappointed that the council and staff would treat this one entity with such, in parentheses, undeserved generosity, and others in town with such short shrift. If there are parking solutions to be made, the whole business community should participate and benefit, and the residents should not have to sacrifice land or aesthetics. Again, this comment was from resident Pam Reeves.
Thank you. I believe Mr. Stanchek has been able to join us by phone. I think you just unmuted. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Dunbar. Appreciate it.
Yes, we are ready to hear your comments. We understand that you have a few things you'd like to add to our conversation.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to express, really our apologies for the circumstances that led to the notice of violations. But I'd also like to express our appreciation for the constructive engagement that we've had with the council and the staff. And I think it's led to a resolution of the NOV and really a good path forward that can solve some of the problems that we've encountered. And just want to say that we're committed, to an ongoing cooperation and compliance. And really, I think we've established, good lines of communication with, Luke and with Sandra and myself and Steve. And I think that we've been able to craft something that I think is a win-win situation and will provide some added parking for the area in the North Town. And then, sort of lastly, what I'd like to say, Mayor Dunbar and council members, is that, we are working really diligently to, establish the correct protocols so that we can get reopened as soon as we can and bring our people back to work and really re-engage with the community. We've had really great reception from our customers, our associates, and I think we've made adjustments in the way we're operating, that will be helpful and not hurtful to the situation. And then lastly, I'd just like to again thank the council and the staff for their understanding and cooperation. It's fostered a really, I think, a cooperative relationship, one that is one of our most important relationships at RH. This is really our hometown, and we're so proud to be a part of it. We're proud of what we've built, and we're thankful for all the support that we've gotten from the entire community, which has been really tremendous. So wanted to thank you again and appreciate the work that's been done to put in front of us I think a good resolution of the situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stanchek. Steve, do we have any, or Gary, do we have any additional information to share before I ask the council for comments?
I would like to just share that the lease approval does have a requirement that just under 50% of the parking would be available for public use. It's not all exclusive to RH, so I just want to clarify that. And the concept has a minimum of 23 spaces being allocated for RH, and that I also want to be really clear that they are still having to park a significant number of employees, but not all employees, on their property. And again, this is, as the council knows, you've all been a part of the discussions and guidance and trying to figure out a solution. And as many of you know, unfortunately, this solution actually was proposed several years ago when RH was first becoming for us in terms of looking at it, and the council had actually approved conceptually leasing this particular area. And this particular lease, as it's been negotiated, is more beneficial to the town and provides more public parking component than did the prior generation. And it's, I think it's the spirit of trying to find a win-win rather than just, end up having a business situation and a parking situation that's not working. So in this particular case, there's a resolution that something different had to be done. And I think that's the spirit with which we've all attempted to work through this.
Thank you. Gary, did you have anything further to add?
Nope, nothing to add.
Okay, thank you. I'll invite comment. We heard our public comment. I'll invite council comments now. Is there anyone who'd like to volunteer to go first? Councilmember Moeller, you're the one that's unmuted, so go ahead.
I think it's sounds like a great project, and I'm glad that we're all on the same page, and I'm looking forward to moving ahead. So thanks to everybody.
Thank you. Councilmember Dornbecker.
Well, I'm glad that there will be public parking provided by the park as well. I think it's unfortunate that we've had the misunderstandings that seem to go on with RH, but hopefully this will be the beginning of a better time and a more productive time for all of us. And I'm looking forward to the leveling of the parking lot up there and them keeping their word of what they're going to do to improve the parking lot up there. Thank you.
Councilmember Durham.
It's my election year, so I chose to take on cannabis and parking. And as a result, I want to remind everyone that this decision has not been made in a vacuum. We've had a parking committee. We have had business meetings. We have had community meetings. We have design meetings, and we've had council meetings. We did try to work with other businesses. This is not a slap in the face to anyone. Every single business was approached and came together about this opportunity to create a parking lot on a public right-of-way that's not part of the park, that's part of a public right-of-way. We have had discussions. It's been going on for quite some time. As much as I would like to create a one-size-fits-all program for this entire town, I've found that's impossible, because if I could do it, we could disband the parking ad hoc committee, which is, God forbid, about to become a standing committee. But it just doesn't happen. What's needed in the middle of town, what's needed in the southern town is different than what's needed in the north side of town. We have an opportunity to develop and improve space so that we can deal with parking. And the only reason I got on the parking committee is because that's the only subject we ever talk about at every council meeting. So we're now have an opportunity to create some sort of results. And once again, this has not been done in a vacuum. There is a huge settlement process here. And I will say this, I don't know if win-win's the right word, but I think what we are working towards is the right choices to be able to move forward with our business and to be able to move forward with our community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Dorman.
Thank you. And thank you to the three RH representatives for your presentation. And really thank you to all concerned. I know a lot of hard work has gone into this. Unfortunately, and I will go ahead and telegraph myself here, I don't fully see eye to eye with some of my colleagues' comments this evening. The term is really long, 55 years. There has been, from what I understand, a true desire to have language that says RH may seek future amendments to the master use permit regarding the number of seats up to the maximum allowed by available parking under the Yountville Municipal Code. To me, that's kind of a disconnect, because to me, going into this negotiation, the reason that we undertook it was because you didn't have enough, RH didn't have enough parking for what you're doing now, much less to add seats, which the total number could go up to 129. So that's a disconnect for me. Another disconnect for me is I can't imagine what this is going to look like, because that is a steep drop off. And when you build it up, or whoever builds it up, when it gets built up, what's it going to look like? And I understand that everybody wants to move with haste. I get that, but I can't really, I cannot, for me, make a decision without seeing what it might look like in some sort of charrette or rendering. I have some other reasons, but I just don't feel it's the right deal at this time. I haven't fully heard everything. We haven't heard from the mayor yet, so I reserve the right to change my mind. But sitting here right now, I love RH. I appreciate everything you all do. I just am not sure that this is the preferred solution to the issues.
Thank you. I will go ahead and start with the comment. We had a very similar project at the very south end of town, working with a single business property, and we were very close to having, ironically, a new shared workforce and public parking lot that was seen as very beneficial. It just so happens that it's at the other end of town from the resident that made the public comment, which I find interesting, but not surprising. We have a section of public property that is probably our most popular park that we have for years as a town talked about how we could build that to be safe and usable parking. And it was a significant cost that continued to be put off and put off. As we renovated the Yountville Community Park, some neighbors were opposed to changing that park at all because they didn't want anything to change. Well, I don't think that's a reasonable way to be a part of a community. And I do think that we have done an exceptional job of making not only that park at the north end, but the park at the south end and all of our open spaces in between much more beautiful, much more accessible and usable. And I see this opportunity as one that's going to make it more beautiful, more usable. Right now, that severely sloped gravel area is a hazard. And let's not pretend that people don't already use it to park there. And it's scary to see when a car parks at about a 45-degree drop-off angle and people are trying to get in and out of their vehicles when there's an event at the park. So the opportunity to make it a safer and more efficient use of that space, I think, is in and of itself a benefit, a substantial community benefit. It doesn't even really matter about the revenue that'll be generated, but it's revenue that will be generated that doesn't currently exist. And I disagree with the Vice Mayor on the point of fear of what it might look like. We still have authority over the ultimate design and how it does come together and fit into that part of the park area and the adjacent public space. So I am not concerned that it can't be made to be appropriate and very efficient with relatively low impact. Might it be a little bit different? Yes. Just like the very accessible picnic area that used to be gravel that people couldn't even walk through. And if you had a mobility device or a cane, good luck getting through that area. And now it's a beautiful, safe, and heavily used part of that park. We have a pathway that goes through that park now that didn't used to exist. We have other features that I think will only be complemented by having over about 24 more legal parking spaces, again, because people were parking wherever they could find about 12 feet of space. And now we're actually creating a safe environment for that. So all that before I get to the fact that I recognize that we held accountable while being a community partner and one of our businesses and a very popular and successful business. But we held RH accountable for the conditions of operation that we agreed to in the beginning. And while that operation drifted off from those conditions and we continually made attempts at dialogue to fix those issues, it took us till today to get to that outcome. While it took longer than I would have liked, I do feel like this is a reasonable resolution. And frankly, I think it's more beneficial to us than to the business because we insisted on not only conditions that improve the impacts to the north end of town. We hear it from folks about now that the north end, I've said it before, we used to hear some of the same people at the north end of town say, you forgot all about us. There's no business, there's no energy up at the north end. And now that there's great energy and successful business at the north end, now we've created a dynamic that some folks find impactful. But I am proud of the fact that the council held firm about needing not only a recognition of failure to comply, but also an appreciation that it was going to take multiple resources, some of it money, some of it operational changes that were going to get you to be in compliance. So I appreciate that. And I respect the effort that has been put forward. It took a little pushing, but I think we've achieved that result. Like I said, I think it's a positive for the town, and I think it's going to allow RH to resume operations as soon as conditions related to the pandemic allow, that are going to be, again, that'll be mutually beneficial to us, I think. So I can support this. I appreciate that it took quite a bit of effort. I appreciate all the effort that both our town manager, our town attorney put into this. And I will again say I appreciate the effort and the willingness to recognize some fault and reach some conclusion with these outcomes from our representatives for RH. So I'll support this as it's been presented and as council has considered it. So with that, I see Councilmember Mueller, you have your hand up.
Just wondering if you'd like a motion for a resolution.
Yes, please.
I would like to make a motion that we approve resolution number 20-3987, a resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Yountville approving a settlement agreement and parking lease with Restoration Hardware.
A second.
So a motion by Councilmember Mueller, a second by Councilmember Durham. And I don't see any other discussion. So Michelle, if you would please have the roll call vote.
Thank you. Councilmember Mueller?
Yes.
Councilmember Durham?
Yes.
Councilmember Dornbecker?
No.
Vice Mayor Dorman?
No.
Mayor Dunbar?
Yes.
Thank you.
So that is approved with a 3-2 vote. So thank you. And again, thank you to our guests representing RH that were able to join us.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on now to our item 11, staff informational report. That agenda item number is 20-2531, the biannual pavement condition index, also known as the PCI update from our Public Works Director, Joe Tagliabasci.
Thank you, Mayor Dunbar, members of the council. It is with extreme pleasure that I am announcing this evening that we have a PCI rating of 78. So that is up 4 points from the last one we did. This is a biannual program that is supported by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. It's required for us to do this biannual inspection by Caltrans to be competitive for some of the monies that we receive from them. And we've put an awful lot of resources even before Measure T to keep our PCI moving forward, and this really is a tremendous effort. And thanks to you all for being supportive of the program and giving us the resources to be able to do this work. Next slide, please, Sam. So I'm just going to show you a few slides of work that we've done over the past couple of years. This was the Yount Street reconstruction, full depth reclamation. All of this money that we are talking about is Measure T funds, gas tax funds, and SB1 funds. So no general funds were used for this work over the past couple of years. Next slide, please, Sam. So by average and by class, you can see here with this slide, as I said before, a slide of a 70 or a score of a 78. Arterials are at 73, our collectors are at 87, and our residentials and locals are, collectors at 87 and residential and local streets are at 77. Those last two are coming up a bit. The arterials are starting to come down a little bit, and that's mostly being drugged down by Washington Street. It does need a little bit of work, and it's not in horrible shape, but it is dragging that number down just a little bit. Next slide, please, Sam. Just so you understand what we're talking about when we say arterial, collectors, and residential. So our arterial streets are Madison, Washington, and Yountville Cross. So those are the classifications Caltrans and the Federal Highway Administration uses. And they generally talk about how traffic gets back and forth along the major thoroughfares in the county and throughout the state and the U.S. Collectors, Solano, California, Yount, and Fennell. So that makes a lot of sense. And then all the other streets are classified as residential or local. Next slide, please. Just so you have an idea of what we're talking about when we say good, very good, poor, or very poor. And we're in the, as I said earlier, 78. So we're in the very good range and heading up, which is a good sign. We are, I believe, 10 points ahead of our nearest city or county here in the Valley. And that's really because you all have dedicated an awful lot of resources to making sure that's true even before Measure T. Next slide, please. So this is a snapshot of all of our streets and the condition that they're in based on that slide I just showed you. The one road that really sticks out for me on this is Yount Mill Road that heads out towards the county. It's really outside of the town limits, most people think, but it isn't. It is classified as a town street, and it really drags our classification down. I think that little red area there where the arrow is, where Sam's highlighting, is somewhere in the 35 range, so very poor. And then the other red one is that little piece on Weber there that's access to the Yountville Mile. And on the north end, it's the French Laundry Gardens. And on the southern side of that is the estate in the Villaggio complex, so all the way down to Washington. Not a lot of traffic goes on there. It's generally the traffic that goes either into the hotel for hotel staff or to the garden staff and a couple of homes owned by TKRG. Next slide, please, Sam. Just a pie chart to again show you where we're at. The largest classification for us, very good, 62%. Poor and good, significantly smaller, and then those two little pieces of very poor, Yount Mill Road and Weber. Next slide, please. So this is what a representation of what we're talking about, so that you can visualize, if you go down these streets, what we're talking about. Adams Street, which we did, I think 2014, still very good. Yount Mill Road that we talked about earlier, very poor. They call it alligator, and if you look at it, it resembles an alligator skin, which is where that term comes from. And then Yount Street is rated as poor, and now that would be rated very good because we just reconstructed that. But if you look at that street, it has a few cuts in it, and that's what causes it to go down. So next slide, please, Sam. And just so you understand what we're talking about when we talk about the types of maintenance we're doing, light maintenance is a microsurface, heavy maintenance is a dig out, and then microservice after we do some of those repairs. A light rehab is what we just finished doing on Oak Circle, Heather, and Oak Leaf Court, 2-inch overlay, and then or a mill and fill. So we do some repairs and then we overlay it with 2 inches of asphalt. Heavy rehab is the kind of work we did on Yountville Crossroad, Adams, Monroe, Madison, and Yount. So all those streets have been reconstructed. Those streets should last 25 years or more with the regular types of maintenance, the light maintenance that we do, microservicing and that kind of thing. Measure T projects 19 and 20, the Yount Street reconstruct, and the 2019 microservicing that we did earlier this fall. And then we just finished up the Oak Circle project that came in, and the bid went out at about $360. We added Oak Leaf Court to that. It's going to come in right around $420,000, so slightly under the bid, under the budgeted amount. On average, our Measure T revenues pre-COVID-19 were around $548, $678. We're expecting those to drop over the next 3 years around 15%. So going to drop about 13% this year, meaning the last 2 months of this fiscal year, somewhere in the 18% range next fiscal year, and then coming back into the 13 or 14% range in 21, 22. Next slide, please, Sam. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or comments you may have.
Joe, thank you very much. It's always great to hear that we're keeping that index so very high. Anyone on a bicycle knows about Yount Mill Road, that's for sure.
Right.
Questions or comments from council on this informational report? Seeing none. Joe, again, Steve, yes.
Well, I just have another additional informational report to share with you when you're ready.
Go ahead. I think we have that covered. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you very much, Council. We appreciate your support.
As you know, we're starting to have some encouraging information from the governor's office that there may be some loosening and some new restrictions that allow for some different activities. I want to share with you what keeps Sam and I up at night and working on, and to let you know that we're currently working on a number of things from a community basis. So this is more, it's going to be a quick kind of what's out there and what we're doing, but by no stretch of the imagination is it finished, and we'll anticipate bringing you a more comprehensive update in 2 weeks. Camp Wyville Summer Camp was probably the most encouraging, is that it does look like we can now begin to develop some type of conceptual program. CDC guidance size is coming out. We need to clarify. Been very challenging, frankly, to be honest, working with Napa Valley Unified School District as to site access, what that's going to look like. But our staff is working on what we might be able to do, what the staffing constraints are, what it might look like if we have to relocate to utilizing more of the community center facility. So the good news is we're working on that. We do anticipate something. Focus is going to be, because we probably are going to have to reduce size, it's going to be focused on essential workers and Yountville priority. 4th of July works fireworks display. We have serious concerns right now, principally related to group size limitations, distancing requirements, budget cancellation impacts, etc. Right now, we're still monitoring that, but we are getting closer to the deadline to enter into an agreement. And part of our concern is that the town really only manages the actual fireworks, and how the public congregates has been an informal. And we're also concerned that if other communities cancel their fireworks display, do we get an influx of people coming up to Yountville, and how might we handle that? So a lot of this comes down to lack of clarity on crowd size. I'm going to put summer movies in the park and summer concerts in the park in the same category right now. We have real concerns about our ability to move forward with them currently based on group size limitations, social distancing. We're going to continue to monitor, possibly delay, do a late start if it's something their guidance comes out, or we're going to continue to look at a alternative virtual solution. Sam's team did a tremendous job with the Art Sip and Stroll. Not quite the same, but we're still looking at there may be some ways to continue the program. Residence Bash. Again, we have a real concern about very popular, the crowd's approaching 400 in that space, and that does not really look like it's going to meet the current guidelines for size limitation, social distancing. We also think it might be an unreasonable request for the business community given what they've gone through, and we're working on some ideas with the chamber on maybe a different kind of community engagement where maybe the community gives back to the businesses. So more to come on that. Golden Ticket Program. Again, we're starting to see some encouraging signs. So again, we're going to have to look at size limitations, impact, but we see some potential programming being able to resume. And also Sam's team has put together, as you know, some virtual classes. So we anticipate a hybrid combination of that through the summer. But again, here's where we're fortunate that a lot of our size, you know, we consider a lot of programs successful with 8 to 15 participants based on what the nature of the program is. So that will probably, especially with some modifications, we anticipate a level of programming. We're also quieter in the summer by virtue of programming. So we anticipate that we should be able to have a better understanding, but move forward with a fall programming. Some of you may know that we've had a longstanding partnership with the Napa County Library, kind of an education outreach with 8 weeks of summer show. This probably is not going to proceed primarily because there's a cost associated with hiring the performers and the activities, and it does not pencil out for 10 participants or 12. But we'll continue to look at there may be some alternatives. Parks and Rec excursion. We need to evaluate and monitor. There may be some that we're able to do, or we have to shift where we're going based on what's out there. As we know right now, attractions, museums, athletic events, and things like that are all on hold. And we also would have to figure out distancing for the use of the bus. Like I say, right now on hold, we may be able to resume something in the fall when we know more. Outdoor tennis, pickleball, playgrounds, picnic areas, park restrooms, and fitness equipment, of which we get numerous requests for why can't we go use them. Right now, the public health order guidance is as it relates to what is considered shared use. So in other words, a tennis player, your ball is being shared amongst multiple people. Pickleball, a fitness piece of equipment, one person uses it, another. It's what they consider shared equipment. We are expecting that there will be some new policy guidance coming out on that, and we may see some ability to relax those as we go. But right now, that's the current focus. There may be some ability to do one-on-one tennis, one-on-one pickleball as opposed to pairs. Bocce falls in the same consideration. So we're waiting for some guidance that the clubs may need to do something about limiting the use of the shared ball. Indoor drop-in sports, again, similar scenario there. Our most popular indoor drop-in sports are indoor pickleball and basketball, and they all involve a shared ball. So we just have to wait and see. Also, if there is some limitations, we may need to displace a little bit of that for the summer camp program. Park site reservations. Also, as you know, most of our park sites, we have a allocated maximum size. So again, we're needing to see, before we can properly reserve them, we need to see where the public health order guidance on size. So again, we anticipate that some of these rentals will be able to resume. Some of the larger ones may not once we know, and we simply do not know where that guidance is at this point. But I will say the good news is conversations are happening, and I do think we're going to see there. But I wanted you all to know that your staff is working on these things. We're trying to think weeks and months out, as well as on the practical side, as well as the budget side. That's all I have on that, unless you have any questions for Sam or I on these.
Thank you. I do want to commend MC Holland yet again for a great Master of Ceremonies job with the art sip and what was it? Not stroll.
It's we call it Art Sip Support this year,
Yes.
and that was our first happy hour.
Yes, with James Patrick Reagan performing. We had, I think it was close to 30 people that logged into his live hour-long concert. So that was a lot of fun. And Samantha, you were great running the show.
We've actually were able to live stream it too at the same time on Facebook, and it's had over 130 views on Facebook. So that's pretty exciting.
Great. I know you have some more of that coming up. Great. Thank you. So other reports, flood control, there was a Zoom meeting today. Nothing of significance for us. Move right ahead. I believe we already received the LAFCO report earlier this evening from Councilmember Mueller. If that's a nod to a yes, that's already been given, or is there a need to repeat anything? Can't hear you. Oh, there you are. There you are. Yeah. Go ahead.
Cal LAFCO, we are also, our meeting is in October. I'm not sure what the California League is doing, but we are making plans to either have less than half the amount of attendees or considering doing something that's going to be virtual over several weeks, 3 or 4 events. So we're also dealing with same issues. That's it.
Thank you. Very quickly, I could go on much longer than we want to here in the 5th hour. League of California Cities update. I am on calls basically daily and sometimes multiple times a day with League of California Cities, executive officers and executive staff. We are in communication with representatives in the governor's office, the state operation of emergency services. Also through my involvement with the U.S. Conference of Mayors and the National League of Cities. All these resources are providing information about either COVID-19 public health activity or economic support coming from the Congress and the state of California. So that continues on a very, very rapid and regular basis. And so I will continue to be representing all of us. I know that Councilmember Dornbecker, as the North Bay Division President, is also very active in what we're doing with our 4 North Bay counties, getting some good ideas from some of our colleagues around the North Bay about how they're dealing with parks and open space activity, what they're looking at to bring businesses back online and things like that. I don't know if there are any other, I don't think we need to get into any of the other activities with the league right now. I just know that there's quite a bit of activity that, especially as the state legislature is getting back into looking at the legislative agendas for the upcoming year and the governor's budget revision, which is basically a wholesale change of the state budget that will be presented later this month. So we will be keeping close eye on that. Are there any other council ad hoc and standing committee reports that we need to hear from any of our council members? Seeing shaking heads. There are just 3 other things I wanted to mention very quickly. I want to say thank you very much and praise Lydia Mondavi and some of the folks that she has brought together that have brought the core response organization, along with Verily, which is a testing organization that have been running the coronavirus testing down at the Napa Expo for the last few weeks. She also was instrumental in getting that testing mobilized up to the Veterans Home, and they have been able to test a significant number of the healthcare workers at the Vets Home, and also some of the independent living residents at the Vets Home. And so she has worked, and I made a comment on this yesterday. I know she's worked tirelessly because I get texts from her early in the morning and late at night, and often in between, about all the advances that they have. We are probably going to see, well, I know we are going to see changes in our countywide numbers of testing, because they've done over 600 tests down at the Expo, and only a couple hundred of those have been calculated into the numbers that we are seeing. Also, they've done, I think, close to 100 of the Vets Home workers and residents. And so there is a lag time there, at least 2 to 3 days to get results back, and then additional lag time to get it worked through the state down to Napa County so that those can be tabulated. So what we are hoping to see, and this falls along with what Steve was saying about the economic recovery piece, is we need to see a stabilized percentage of positive test cases that will allow us to really make progress on reopening certain business sectors that are allowed by the state orders. And so we're very hopeful that as we do receive a lot more test results, that the positive cases stay reasonably low. I think our number before today was at 74 positive cases in Napa County reported, with some not yet reported. In the same general theme, this is 95% very positive story with some unfortunate component to it. Yountville residents Amelia Lazar Lee and her husband Man On Lee. Many of you probably recognize the Lazar name, but they are an amazing young family that have donated over 2,000 N95 and surgical face masks to the Napa County public health response. Many of those masks have been used by the healthcare workers up at the Veterans Home. Even some of them have been used by our employees here in the Yountville, especially Public Works, as they continue to provide services out in the public. And so we want to make sure that they stay safe. So it's amazing the effort that they have made. The downside that I feel compelled to share is that because Manny is of Asian descent from Hong Kong, they live in Hong Kong full time, and we'll be going back there the beginning of June. They have received some racial slurs targeted at them by frankly, some ignorant individuals. And I bring it up because what those people don't realize is Amelia and Manny have helped keep our entire Yountville community safer because of their generosity. So let's not be idiots out there, please, people, and let's respect the effort that is being put forward. Last thing I want to say about the economic recovery of the pandemic is the chambers of commerce throughout the valley. I know Whitney Diver McAvoy has been very active in this space, along with the Napa chambers, and business leaders throughout the valley are putting together a very impressive strategy for business recovery. They're using all the thought leaders in over a dozen different business sectors to figure out the best way to reopen. And as Steve was saying, the governor and Napa County are providing guidance and parameters within which we will be able to reactivate some of our businesses. Some will be sooner, as soon as this weekend, potentially. Others will need to be a little bit further in the future. But know that there are a lot of very smart business folks that are putting their thoughts together to create a very compelling strategy that will allow a rapid recovery in our local economy. And so we know how important that is to all of us. It also is going to allow us to get out and about even more than we are right now. So I wanted to share all of that information with all of you tonight. That's all I have. If I don't see anyone else with any further comment, I want to again thank Michelle specifically, and also Samantha. I know the two of you have put significant effort leading up to these Zoom meetings, making sure that we're all on them and can be seen and heard. Again, I want to thank everyone that's participated on this call, because these are as smooth as any of the other teleconference meetings I'm participating in. The fact that our meetings aren't dropping off the grid and we're able to see and hear and have our business taken care of. Thank you so much, especially Michelle, all that you do to prepare us all for this. I very much appreciate that effort. With all that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn to our next meeting, which is a special meeting for a budget workshop on Wednesday, May 13th at 9:30. I will entertain a motion. I think Michelle wants to do one last roll call vote. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Vice Mayor, a motion, second by Councilmember Dornbecker.
Yeah.
I saw the movement. All right, Michelle, please, one last roll call vote.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Dorman,
Yes.
Councilmember Dornbecker,
Yes.
Councilmember Moeller,
Yes.
Councilmember Durham,
I will never complain about the chairs we use in the chamber councils again. And yes.
oh, and Mayor Dunbar.
Yes. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much for your patience and your watching us live.
Yes, thank you, everyone.